Chapter 212. When the bus began to roll again, the 5 remaining passengers felt as if they had just woken from a dream. The past 5 days had been agonizingly long. Confronted with the death of Feng Wanming, Ningqiu Shui and Bai Xiaoxiao silently reminded themselves once more, inside the Crimson Door, one must never let their guard down, not even for a single second before departure. Inside the city, Geikai stood amidst the mist, his venomous gaze fixed on the bus as it slowly faded into the distance. Suddenly he lunged forward. He flickered in and out of sight and appeared right outside the bus window. His deathly pale face pressed against the glass, staring directly at Liang Yan. His crimson pupils were enough to make anyone's soul flee in terror. "You're not willing to accept this?" Liang Yan said coldly, staring back at him through the glass. Geikai bared his teeth, revealing a mouthful of blood. His expression was wild and manic. "I will win! I will win! I must win!" Liang Yan replied calmly. "If you play the game, you have to accept the consequences." Hearing this, Geikai let out a furious roar. He reached out his pale hand, opened the bus window, and tried to grab Liang Yan. Seeing this, everyone on the bus felt a chill run down their spine. This terrifying ghost could actually enter the bus? Ningqiu Shui instinctively reached for the ghost artifact on her body. But at that very moment, the bus suddenly stopped. Geikai's pale hand, just inches from Liang Yan, was suddenly held back by some mysterious force. Outside the window, Geikai screamed in terror, as if he had seen something utterly horrifying. Vaguely, everyone on the bus saw a strange silhouette reflected on the clear glass. It was a tree branch. On the branch, there were a few withered yellow leaves, mixed with rust. After seeing this branch, Geikai's entire body began to rust at a visible rate. Finally, he collapsed to the ground, shattering into pieces of green bronze, his eyes filled with fear and unwillingness. Was that the bronze tree? For the first time seeing a part of it, everyone on the bus was terrified. They were certain that the image of the branch reflected on the window was not an illusion. It must be. Liang Yan's expression was calmer than the others. Clearly, this was not the first time he had seen it. Behind the 3 doors, the ghosts are less restrained and their strength is far greater. Sometimes, they come to provoke the Crimson Door, but the outcome is always tragic. Even a ghost cannot defy the Crimson Door. As he said this, he seemed to think of something. His expression shifted slightly, and he said no more. Geikai was dead. The bus continued to roll forward. Soon, everyone on board fell asleep. When they returned to the ghost dwelling, Ningqiu Shui and the others saw that everyone in the ghost dwelling was standing at the door waiting. Only when they confirmed that all 3 had safely stepped off the bus did everyone breathe a sigh of relief. Liu Renfeng rushed forward excitedly and embraced Ningqiu Shui. "Damn, kid, you actually made it back alive! That's insane!" They always said the 7th Crimson Door had a death rate through the roof. But for their ghost dwelling, this time the death rate was 0. Everyone had braced themselves for the possibility that ghost dwelling would lose a lot of people. How could they not be thrilled? "It's good that you're back." Mengjun leaned against the doorframe, letting out a quiet sigh of relief. A rare smile tugged at the corner of his lips. Tianshun and Junlu Yuan were beaming too. The worried look that had clouded Junlu Yuan's youthful face was gone. "Tonight, Big Beard is going to cook up a feast. We're going to celebrate big time." The 2 of them were close in age, both orphans. They'd quickly become good friends. Back at the villa, everyone ate and drank their fill. Afterward, Tianshun volunteered to wash the dishes, while the rest gathered by the fireplace, listening to Ning Shui recount his terrifying experiences inside the Crimson Door. The flames in the hearth danced and flickered, their light reflected in everyone's eyes. They listened intently. To them, this was invaluable experience. Time passed, and before they knew it, midnight had arrived. Everyone had been chatting happily, but eventually, fatigue set in, and they went to bed one by one. Liang Yan, as always, stayed by the fireplace, staring into the dancing flames in silence. Ningqiu Shui stood up. Before leaving, he said to Liang Yan, "Uncle Yan, that's the power of a letter. With a letter like that, do you really think Uncle Mang would lose to a rookie?" Liang Yan said nothing. He had encountered players with letters before. To put it bluntly, inside the Crimson Door, a letter was a life-saving charm. A player who was already a master, guided by a letter, and armed with a powerful ghost artifact, could they really fail in a low-level door? Seeing Lang Yan lost in thought, Ningqiu Shui got up and left. That was just how Lang Yan was. If he couldn't figure it out for himself, no amount of talking would help. Let him think it over on his own. At the same time, a flicker of curiosity stirred in Ningqiu Shui's heart. What kind of letter had Uncle Mang received that he chose to stay behind in the world after the Crimson Door? What was he planning to do? Where did those letters come from, and what was their purpose? Ningqiu Shui lay in bed, his mind a tangled mess. There was so much he didn't understand. He closed his eyes, and the image of Geikai's death flashed through his mind. It was like a withered yellow leaf falling from a bronze tree. Half asleep, half awake, Ningqiu Shui drifted into slumber. In the city of Shiliu, in some rundown slum, the place was desolate and crumbling beyond belief. Rusty water pipes, peeling walls. A fat man in shabby clothes lay snoring loudly on a creaky bed. It wasn't dawn yet, but he was jolted awake by the ringing of his phone. Annoyed, he picked up. In an instant, the fat man's eyes went from groggy to razor-sharp. "Brother Chi?" A steady male voice came through the line. "Ah, Ren is dead." The fat man frowned. "Ah, Ren is dead? Didn't he bring a letter when he entered the Crimson Door?" Wang Chi said, "That was the 7th Crimson Door. Anyone daring to step inside is either a fool or a master. Besides, the 3 Crimson Doors behind it hold too many variables. Relying on a single letter to control the entire situation is unrealistic." "Yang Ming, Ah Ren is dead. His mission naturally falls to you now." Yang Ming let out a cold laugh. "Leave it to me, Brother Chi. You know, I've always been loyal to the organization." Wang Chi said, "After dawn, go to Dragon Tiger Mountain. Stay there and wait nearby. Don't act rashly. Wait for my signal." Yang Ming agreed. Wang Chi added another warning. "This time, you must seize the letter. It is the heavenly script, of utmost importance. I chose you because I trust your skill and your loyalty. Understand?" Hearing the words, heavenly script, Yang Ming's entire body jolted. "A heavenly script has appeared again?" Wang Chi grunted in affirmation. "You know the weight of this matter. The enemy is highly alert. There is only one chance. Once you receive the order, you must use all your strength, kill him swiftly, and seize the letter." A sinister smile curled at the corner of Yang Ming's mouth. "Don't worry, Brother Chi, in this world, no one is better at killing than I am." What should a killer look like? Dressed in a sharp suit, a cigarette dangling from his lips, a pistol in hand, shooting with unerring accuracy, having backup wherever he goes, bullets never touching him, a cold-blooded reaper on the job, a charming playboy once the mission is done, the heartthrob of every nightlife den. But in reality, a killer could be anyone around you. The mechanic by the roadside with grease-blackened hands, the street vendor pushing a small cart, or the taxi driver calling his wife to complain about the lack of customers today. If they want to be. The first skill a killer must learn isn't shooting or knife fighting, it's disguise. Disguise lets them approach their target faster and protect themselves better. Yang Ming was a master of disguise. Sometimes he was a waiter in a restaurant. Other times, he frequented the high-end places only the wealthy visited. But most of the time, he lived in a small shack in a filthy, chaotic, stinking slum. Living here made it nearly impossible for anyone to tail him. If anyone tried to follow him, they'd soon vanish mysteriously within this maze of a slum. After receiving the mission, Yang Ming simply brushed the grime off his clothes, took a quick wash, then put on a set of oil-stained garments, grabbed a bottle of beer, and staggered along as he walked. Of course, this time, he also brought along his companion of over 20 years. It had been a long time since he last carried it. This time, he brought it along because Yang Ming understood the importance of the heavenly scripture. He didn't want to make any mistakes. Unlike the human scripture, the heavenly scripture carried information of immense significance, affecting countless lives. And those who held the heavenly scripture were often incredibly dangerous to deal with. Before this, Wang Chi had revealed to Yang Ming that the organization had once lost 2 experts who had passed through the 8th Crimson Door, all for a single heavenly scripture. Yang Ming was just a player, having only passed through the 5th crimson door. He knew full well that those who could survive the 8th door were terrifyingly powerful. Yet, despite such heavy losses, the organization not only felt no regret, they considered it worth the cost. As for the specific contents of that heavenly scripture, he didn't know. Wang Qi didn't know either. From here, Mount Longhu wasn't far. The small town at its base remained unchanged, crowded with people coming to seek blessings. Along the roadside, fortune tellers had set up their stalls, their customers coming and going in a steady stream. Yang Ming casually found a roadside eatery, ordered a bowl of noodles, and sat down to eat breakfast. He ate slowly, unhurriedly. After finishing, he didn't pay with his phone. Instead, he pulled out a stack of cash, counted it carefully, and handed it to the owner. 8 yuan and 5 mao. Count it yourself. Don't say I shortchanged you, Yang Ming muttered to the owner. The owner glanced at the money and grinned. No way that's happening. We've been doing business here for decades. Reputation is everything. We've never cheated a customer. Leaving the eatery, Yang Ming wandered around Mount Longhu like an ordinary tourist. By noon, he suddenly received a message from Wang Qi. The message was simple, just 2 sets of numbers, 254, 353. After reading it, Yang Ming immediately deleted the message. Then he melted into the crowd, vanishing without a trace. Deep within the town was a winding, twisting alley. Most of the people living here were locals, struggling to get by. The terrain was complex, with convenience stores crammed side by side and internet cafes scattered everywhere. Yang Ming walked along the alley. By the time he reached this place, the GPS on his phone had completely failed. He could only ask for directions as he went. But he had a natural sense of direction. Soon enough, he found what he was looking for. It was an internet cafe called Magabak Hards. The place was incredibly shabby. There wasn't even a proper sign outside. The owner had simply propped up a wooden board as a makeshift sign. Pasted all over that wooden board were strange little cards. They featured pictures of scantily clad girls, smiling sweetly, the hostesses of the internet cafe. Touch them, look at them. All free of charge. Pushing aside the curtain, Yang Ming stepped into the internet cafe. Immediately, a foul stench hit him. First came the smell of feet, the odor of leather shoes worn for days without cleaning, wrapped in sour, stinking socks, assaulted his nostrils, making him want to vomit. Next came the smell of instant noodles, sweat, cigarette smoke, alcohol, and even flatulence. Even Yang Ming, a man who lived in the slums, nearly vomited. However, he adapted quickly. Yang Ming's gaze swept through the haze of smoke, and he soon spotted a man sitting in a dark corner of the internet cafe. That man wore a Taoist robe, looking utterly out of place among the crowd, as he played a boring online game on the computer. He seemed a little nervous, as if waiting for something. Every so often, he would lift his head and glance toward the cafe's entrance. Manager, set me up with a computer. Yang Ming frowned at the young, rather pretty girl at the counter, his tone that of a thug. The manager looked at Yang Ming's filthy appearance, her eyes filled with obvious disgust. ID card. Despite her irritation, she handled the task professionally. Didn't bring it. Get me a temp card. How much for a fake name? 10 yuan. Minimum 20. Fine. After paying, Yang Ming took the temp card and then strolled casually toward the man in the Taoist robe. At the same time, he reached for the special dagger at his waist. But just as he got close to the man, he noticed another young man had also appeared there. Their eyes met. Yang Ming sensed something was wrong and was about to strike immediately, when he heard the other man whisper, "Are you also from Luosheng Men?" Yang Ming froze, staring at the young man before him with suspicion. "You too?" The young man replied, "I'm not." The moment he finished speaking, Yang Ming felt a sharp pain in his palm. He looked down in horror and saw that his hand had been nailed to the back of the chair. Yang Ming tried to pull his hand free, but a searing pain from his waist left him unable to move. In that instant, Yang Ming's heart plummeted into an abyss. The nail driven into his waist had reverse barbs. This kind of nail couldn't be bought on the market. It was always custom made. This guy was a seasoned veteran. In that moment between life and death, Yang Ming tried to turn and flee, but the nail gun hidden in the other man's sleeve fired 2 shots into his knees, sending him crashing to the ground. Before he could even hit the floor, a karate chop to the back of his neck knocked him unconscious. The light in the internet cafe was dim, and everyone was absorbed in their games, so no one noticed what had happened. Ning Chu Shui put away the nail gun, caught Yang Ming, and said, "You're lucky. If I'd arrived any later, you'd be dead." The man in the Taoist robe had stood up, looking at Ning Chu Shui with a mix of complexity and astonishment. Then he glanced at Yang Ming, now lying in his arms, and asked anxiously, "What do we do with this guy?" Ning Chu Shui replied, "I'll go buy a bottle of beer and pour it on him. The nails are specially made. The wounds are very small. As long as we don't pull them out, he won't bleed for now. Later, we'll help him walk, pretend he's drunk, and take him somewhere secluded." The middle-aged man nodded. "So, what happens next?" Ning Chu Shui thought for a moment. "I have a few questions I want to ask him." The man furrowed his brow. "And after you ask them?" Ning Chu Shui didn't hesitate. "Bury him." The two of them brought Yang Ming to a secluded spot on Longhu Mountain. The Taoist wiped the sweat from his brow and said to Ning Chu Shui, "Ning, Sheng, I truly owe it to you. If not for you, I fear by now I would have been more dead than alive." Ning Chu Shui used a rope to tie Yang Ming tightly to a tree trunk, working as he spoke. "Don't say that. After all, you helped me before. But still, I want to confirm one thing. Are you Red Bean?" The Taoist nodded. "Yes, I am Red Bean." Ning Chu Shui finished his task and studied the Taoist from head to toe with a serious gaze. "What's your name?" The Taoist replied. "This poor priest does not use a worldly name. My Taoist title is Xuan Qing Zi." Ning Chu Shui nodded. Earlier, Field Mouse had sent him a message saying he'd found Red Bean's whereabouts and urged him to hurry there, because a suspicious target had arrived in the town at the foot of Longhu Mountain since morning, likely aiming for Red Bean. To be fair, the intel from Field Mouse was always reliable. It helped Ning Chu Shui locate the Taoist first, then explain the situation to him, using him as bait. Doing this naturally came with risks, but the Taoist had agreed without hesitation. Xuan Qingzi looked at Yang Ming, tied to the tree, and asked uncertainly, "So now, we just wait for him to wake up?" Ning Chu Shui said, "That's the humane procedure. But I don't have much patience with enemies." With that, he casually picked up a small dry branch from the ground, snapped it, then aimed at the gap between Yang Ming's fingernails and shoved it in hard. A blood-curdling scream echoed through the area, startling the nearby birds into a frantic flight. Xuan Qingzi stood by, witnessing the scene, his eyelids twitching uncontrollably. He had grown up in a mountain temple, rarely ever descending to the mortal world. How could he have ever witnessed such a sight? How could Ning Chu Shui do such cruel things so calmly? "Are you awake?" Ning Chu Shui flashed a brilliant smile at Yang Ming. Yang Ming quickly adapted to the pain. He struggled, but found himself bound tightly. One hand was still nailed to the back of the chair. The slightest movement sent pain radiating through him. "Who are you?" Yang Ming's voice trembled. Earlier, in that life-or-death moment, he hadn't had time to think. But now, recalling it, Yang Ming suddenly remembered a very fearsome figure in the underworld, one who was notorious for using nail guns. "I asked the questions, don't ask back," Ning Chu Shui said. "Are you from Luo Sheng Men?" A bitter smile twisted Yang Ming's lips. "No, brother, you've got the wrong guy." "What is Luo Sheng Men?" "I just went online to—" Thump! Before he could finish, a nail pierced straight through the back of his foot. Yang Ming screamed in agony, gritting his teeth to endure it, the layers of fat on his face trembling violently from the pain. "It's him, all right." Ning Chu Shui snapped a photo of Yang Ming's badge, then pulled the dagger from his waist and photographed that too. He sent both pictures to Field Mouse and Bai Xiaoxiao, tasking them with further investigation. Bai Xiaoxiao had no ordinary background in the real world. Though her information-gathering speed couldn't match Field Mouse's, she might be able to dig deeper. Done with that, Ning Chu Shui fixed his gaze on Yang Ming again and asked, "Second question. Why are you people hunting down those who possess the letter?" Yang Ming's breathing grew heavy. "If I tell you, will you let me go?" Thump! The moment he finished speaking, a nail was driven straight through his shin bone. The bone-piercing pain was too much for Yang Ming to bear. He let out a wretched scream. "Stop asking nonsense. I don't want to repeat myself." Though Ning Chu Shuai's tone was calm, it carried a crushing pressure like a mountain. It's the higher-ups who want it. As for the specific reason, I don't know either. Ning Chu Shui smirked. You really don't know, or are you pretending not to? Yang Ming clenched his teeth. I really don't know. Ning Chu Shui aimed the nail gun at his forehead. Yang Ming, terrified, shouted, I'll talk, don't kill me. This involves a very important secret. Don't kill me and I'll tell you. Ning Chu Shui lowered the gun. Fine, I won't kill you. Speak. Yang Ming's forehead was drenched in sweat. Just now, when Ning Chu Shui aimed the nail gun at his head, he had truly felt death closing in. Yang Ming was almost certain that if he had hesitated even a moment longer, there would already be several nails lodged in his skull. They want the letter. At the mention of the word letter, Ning Chu Shui's eyes sharpened. What do they want the letter for? That, I really don't know. To be precise, I'm not even a member of Luo Sheng Men yet. My contribution points aren't high enough. I'm not qualified to join them. After saying this, Yang Ming's eyes reddened, and he gritted his teeth at Ning Chu Shui. You promised you wouldn't kill me. Ning Chu Shui stared straight into his eyes. I'm not your father. Why would you believe what I say? Yang Ming froze. In the next instant, several nails appeared in his forehead. His body crumpled to the ground, lifeless. Xuan Qingzi watched a living person die right before his eyes. His legs gave way, and he collapsed to the ground. Ning Chu Shui glanced at him. Never seen a dead body before? Xuan Qingzi's face was pale, and he said nothing. Ning Chu Shui asked, Does your temple have a shovel? Xuan Qi nodded. Go get the shovel. Bury him. Xuan Qingzi glanced at Yang Ming's corpse, dared not say a word, and hurried into the woods. Ning Chu Shui hoisted Yang Ming's body and followed behind him. After walking for a while, Ning Chu Shui suddenly spoke. Taoist, you are not Red Bean. Xuan Qingzi, who was walking ahead, gave a slight start. He stood still for a moment, then turned around, forcing a stiff smile. I am. Ning Chu Shui shook his head. You are not. But don't worry, who Red Bean is, to me, actually doesn't matter much. The person I want to meet is only to understand more about the letter. You must know that the holder of the letter is very dangerous, so to protect Red Bean, you pretended to be him. For you to do this, Red Bean must have a very close relationship with you. Perhaps your master, or your senior brother, senior sister, junior sister. Today I saved your life. Consider it a favor for Red Bean. In the future, tell Red Bean to talk with me more. Getting to know someone like me will do him no harm. Xuan Qingzi never expected to be seen through so quickly. Was it my tone that gave me away? He asked. Because Xuan Qingzi remembered that Red Bean had previously told them he had contacted a newcomer who knew nothing. Perhaps the newcomer Red Bean mentioned was this man before him? Ning Chu Shui smiled. That's only part of it. He is a very cautious person. He would never swagger around in one place without moving, like you did. Xuan Qingzi fell into deep thought. Arriving at the Taoist temple, he told Ning Chu Shui to wait outside while he went in to fetch a pickaxe and a shovel. Where should we bury him? Xuan Qingzi asked. Ning Chu Shui stood on the mountaintop and surveyed the area. Is there a lake or a river nearby? Let's choose a place with good feng shui for him, so the decay will be faster. Places with water have looser soil, teeming with microorganisms. A corpse there will decompose more quickly. The microorganisms help them erase most of the traces left on the body. Guided by Xuan Qingzi, the two found a feng shui treasure land. They buried the corpse and burned the clothes. Ning Chu Shui took away Yang Ming's nail and dagger. I have a question. Why not just cremate the body? Xuan Qingzi watched Ning Chu Shui's practiced movements, his heart beating faster. Ning Chu Shui washed the blood and mud from his hands in the temple, not looking up as he chuckled. I can tell you've never handled a corpse before. Unless you have a specialized furnace and a suitable location, cremating a body is a very stupid act. The smell is strong, the smoke is thick, and the corpse ends up looking neither human nor ghost. Then you still have to deal with it again. It's very time-consuming. He paused, then explained, even the high-temperature areas of crematorium furnaces can't truly burn a person to ash, let alone a self-made fire. Hearing this, Xuan Qingzi couldn't help but shudder, stepping back half a step. Good heavens! What exactly was this man's profession? How could he rattle off so many details so fluently? Before, he often handled corpses. Are you also an assassin? Xuan Qingzi swallowed nervously. Ning Shui shook his head. I'm a veterinarian. All right, I need to go now. I doubt you'll let me see Red Bean anyway. After all, someone like me looks a bit dangerous. Go back and tell him. Let him decide for himself. I have many questions I want to ask him. Xuan Qingzi nodded. Ning Shui turned and left. This time, his main concern was that Red Bean might be dealt with by someone else. After all, judging from the current situation, Red Bean knew a lot of information related to the letter and seemed willing to share some of it with him. That was crucial. Returning to his lodgings, Ning Shui quickly received news from Bai Xiaoxiao and Field Mouse. Combining their information, he learned that the man named Yang Ming was a notorious assassin, nicknamed Wu Guang, the same name as the dagger he had found on Yang Ming's body. Yang Ming had used that dagger to kill many people, including some well-known figures in the underworld. In fact, at the internet cafe Makasan Ka, Ning Shui had clearly felt the oppressive aura from Yang Ming. He didn't want to get hurt, so during their confrontation, he used words to distract Yang Ming's attention. Then, seizing the opportunity, he adjusted the angle of his nail gun and destroyed Yang Ming's familiar knife-drawing hand, rendering him no longer a threat. However, aside from that, Field Mouse had also discovered that early this morning, Yang Ming had spoken with someone. But that phone number had been encrypted using a special method, so he hadn't been able to trace it yet. Ning Shui wasn't in a hurry. Striking the grass and startling the snake too early wouldn't be wise. He opened the thrush and quietly waited for Red Bean to contact him. But Red Bean seemed very busy today. It wasn't until late at night that he finally took the initiative to message Ning Shui. You there? Yes. Thanks for today. What were you doing that made someone step up to draw attention away from you? I really don't like chatting with you. The moment I let something slip, you figure it all out. If I were that good, I wouldn't have waited so long for you. What do you want to know? I don't have much time. Ask the important things. If I can tell you, I will. If I can't, don't ask again. Why did the people from Luosheng Men want to steal the letter? You're a ghost guest too, right? The people from Luosheng Men steal letters because letters that aren't delivered to the Crimson Door can be specially processed, turned into crucial clues for entering the Crimson Door, almost like God's perspective clues. Red Bean, you've been through the Crimson Door. You should know what that means. How is it specially processed? I don't know. I'm not part of Luosheng Men. I've only heard that their method of handling letters is brutal, but the specifics I'm not clear on. All right, next question. What did you do today? Heaven's secrets cannot be revealed. Leave me a message. I have to go. This place isn't safe. In front of the computer screen, Ning Shui froze, vanished after saying that. He wasn't surprised. Staring at these chat logs, Ning Shui's mind churned. Luosheng Men kills people to steal letters. No wonder in the ghost-dwelling rankings, Luosheng Men sits at the top. Their methods are too ruthless. But Red Bean said the method of handling letters was brutal. Why use the word brutal to describe it? Just as Ning Shui's thoughts began to spiral, a knock came at the door. Not heavy, not light. Your letter. A deep male voice sounded. Ning Shui snapped back to reality. He rushed to the door and saw the letter shoved through the crack. He yanked the door open abruptly, but outside the door and down the hallway, there was no one. Only a single letter lay on the ground, proof that someone had just been there. He turned and picked up the letter. This time, it felt different from before. Ning Shui could clearly sense it. The letter in his hand had a very strange texture. It felt like some mischievous creature. The moment he touched the letter, Ning Shui felt a very familiar sensation. That feeling was skin. More precisely, human skin. Even the surface of the envelope still retained the warmth of human flesh. As this thought crossed Ning Shui's mind, even he was slightly startled. He quickly closed the door, returned to his room, and drew the curtains. The room instantly fell into darkness. He turned on the light and sat down on the sofa. His fingers, holding the letter, trembled unconsciously. He opened the envelope. A stench of blood rushed into his face. Ning Chu Shui raised an eyebrow slightly, pulling out the paper inside. Looking at the contents on the paper, Ning Chu Shui was frozen in place. It was a painting, a very strange painting. In the painting, a rusted giant spread its arms wide, like a road stretching out in both directions. Two identical figures stood on the arms, one walking left, one walking right. Both were running frantically, their distance from the giant exactly the same. And at the end of the arm-like roads, the giant's hands were clenched tightly, as if something was hidden inside. Because the two human figures were drawn so crudely, Ning Chu Shui couldn't tell who they were. Or perhaps, it didn't matter who they were. Seeing this painting, Ning Chu Shui immediately thought of Red Bean's painting. Both shared a similar style, very abstract. The material of this letter is different from the previous ones, and the hint on it doesn't seem to be about a copy within the Crimson Door. Ning Chu Shui frowned. His intuition told him that this letter was very important, more important than all the letters before it. After examining it, Ning Chu Shui immediately put it away. He did not take a photo of the letter's contents to send to Field Mouse for investigation. What had happened at Dragon Tiger Mountain before made Ning Chu Shui realize that anyone connected to this letter would become very dangerous. Ning Chu Shui did not want Field Mouse to get into trouble because of him. However, he still took a photo of the letter's contents, planning to investigate it himself later. That fake blind man from last time seemed quite reliable. If I could show him this painting, perhaps he could give me some answers. Thinking this, Ning Chu Shui asked Field Mouse about the fake blind man's location. The latter quickly provided some useful information for Ning Chu Shui. This matter sounds confusing. Because I have to process information for long periods, my memory is actually very good. It's hard to forget a person's appearance once I've paid attention to them. But that fake blind man, I really can't remember him clearly. I only remember he seemed thin. Try your luck at the foot of Dragon Tiger Mountain. It's an ancient town in the small park. Seeing this, Ning Chu Shui printed out the painting, bought some paper and brushes, and the next morning went to the town at the foot of Dragon Tiger Mountain. He sat in the town's only park, pretending to draw. Removed from the envelope of the letter, no one knew this painting contained an important secret. Ning Chu Shui stayed in the park for a long time, drawing a few more abstract paintings as camouflage. But until noon, he still hadn't encountered the fake blind man. Just as Ning Chu Shui was about to stand up and leave, a slightly aged voice suddenly sounded beside him. "Young friend, these paintings, did you draw them?" Ning Chu Shui turned around, his heart pounding. It was an old fortune teller. Sunglasses, a classic long coat, a very ordinary face. So ordinary that no one could remember it. Wasn't this the fake blind man Field Mouse had mentioned? "One of them isn't mine," Ning Chu Shui replied. The fake blind man stroked the beard on his chin, smiling slyly. "Young friend, would you mind if I took a look?" Ning Chu Shui didn't refuse, handing the fake blind man several paintings from his hand. The old man glanced at them once, then immediately picked out the painting from the letter. "Young friend, this painting wasn't drawn by you, was it?" Ning Chu Shui smiled. "That's right. You're very skilled, recognizing it at a glance. How about telling my fortune? Who drew it?" He set a trap, but the fake blind man didn't take the bait. He clicked his tongue. "Young friend, that's not good. There are 3 things a fortune teller cannot calculate. First, you cannot tell fortunes for the dead. This painting carries both killing intent and heavenly secrets. Clearly, it was made by a dead person, and a very powerful dead one at that. If I didn't know my limits and tried to calculate a hexagram, I might meet with trouble tonight." Ning Chu Shui's heart stirred slightly. It seemed this fake blind man truly had some ability. "I have offended you, but there is one thing I don't understand. I beg you, elder, to enlighten me." The fake blind man waved his hand. "Oh, I'm not worthy of being called an elder. What does my young friend wish to ask?" Ning Chu Shui pointed at the painting. "I still want to ask about this painting. I'm ignorant. I don't understand it well. Please, help me explain." The fake blind man stared at the painting in Ning Shui's hands, examining it over and over, his expression turning gravelly unreadable. "My friend, are you sure you want an explanation of this painting?" Ning Shui nodded. "I'm sure." The fake blind man hesitated, opening his mouth, then pausing for a long, tense moment. He seemed to be seriously weighing what to say and what not to say. The secret tied to this painting was too great. It had reached the level of heaven's secret. If he misspoke, if he uttered even a single word he shouldn't, he feared he would bring disaster upon himself later. Finally, after careful deliberation, the fake blind man spoke slowly. "Man is life, rust is death. The arm is the scale of life and death. Whether you go left or right, it is still the same person." This painting has two interpretations. First, life and death are predetermined. The laws cannot be changed. No matter how a person runs on this scale, in the end, it does not affect the outcome. Ning Shui's eyes flickered at this. He asked, "May I ask, sir, what is the second interpretation?" The fake blind man stroked his chin, then slowly uttered a sentence that made Ning Shui's heart suddenly stop. If someone can run past themselves on this scale, then that person can break the balance between life and death. The fake blind man's explanation to Ning Shui seemed mysterious, as if he had said everything, yet also nothing at all. But Ning Shui understood that because this painting was connected to the mist world and the crimson door, it must conceal a tremendous karmic weight. That the fake blind man dared not speak clearly to him was understandable. After all, the man was a fortune teller, not a sage. Ning Shui tried to offer the fake blind man money, but the old man refused. He smiled cheerfully at Ning Shui. "I retired long ago. Now, when I read fortunes for people, it's purely by fate. If there is fate, I'll conveniently cast a divination for them. If there is no fate, then no matter how much money they offer, I won't do it." With that, he clasped his hands behind his back and swayed away. Ning Shui put the painting away. When he looked up again, the fake blind man had vanished without a trace. He thought back and was somewhat startled to realize that, just like Field Mouse, he could no longer remember what the fake blind man looked like. So, there really are transcendent masters in this world after all. Ning Shui laughed bitterly at himself. In the past, he had never believed in such things. After spending some time outside, Ning Shui found himself with nothing to do. He decided to return to the ghost dwelling, planning to check which crimson door to train in next. After experiencing the seventh crimson door, Ning Shui knew all too well the importance of maintaining a high-intensity training regimen within the crimson door over a long period. In the ghost dwelling, the longest surviving guests were often those who frequently entered and exited the crimson door. As for the Luo Sheng men, he wanted to wait until Field Mouse found the person who had spoken with Yang Ming first, before making his move. Yang Ming was clearly just a minor figure. Someone like that could hardly be squeezed for any useful information. However, when Ning Shui returned to the ghost dwelling, he saw two teenagers sitting there, watching a horror movie. The curtains were drawn, the lights were off, and combined with the already dim light of the mist world, the atmosphere in the hall became especially gloomy. "Oh, Brother Shui, why are you back?" Tianxun greeted him with a grin. Ning Shui replied, "The matters outside are all settled. I came back to see if there's a suitable crimson door to train in." Tianxun's eyes lit up. "Oh, perfect timing. Sister Bai is about to open her next crimson door. Why don't you go with her?" Ning Shui was slightly taken aback. "Xiao Xiao, her next door is about to open." Tianxun counted on his fingers. "That's right. Looks like it's tomorrow. Tomorrow will be Sister Bai's sixth crimson door. If Sister Bai makes it through the sixth door, then our ghost dwelling might just get a few new members." Ning Shui asked curiously, "If someone passes the sixth door, the ghost dwelling gains new members?" Tianxun explained, "Generally speaking, yes. But if you have the energy, you can also look for candidates yourself. After all, Brother Shui knows Lu Yuan's situation well." Ning Shui nodded. "All right, I'll call Xiao Xiao later." After a brief greeting, he walked to his bedroom and called Bai Xiao Xiao. "Hey!" From the other end of the line came Bai Xiao Xiao's light panting, along with the steady thud of a jump rope hitting the ground. Without thinking, he knew she was skipping rope right now. Xiao Xiao, Tianxin said you're opening your sixth door tomorrow? Bai Xiao Xiao stopped jumping, gulped down some water and said, Xiaoxun really does remember it better than I do myself. What's wrong, Chu Shui? Worried about me? Hearing the teasing tone in Bai Xiao Xiao's voice, Ning Chu Shui smiled. I've finished handling everything outside. I was just about to head back to the ghost dwelling to find a new crimson door. Since your door has already arrived, let's go in together. Bai Xiao Xiao cleared her throat, her tone turning a bit more serious. You need to think this through carefully. My next door is the sixth door. While its difficulty isn't as high as the seventh, it's nothing to scoff at. If you go in, there's a chance you won't make it out. Ning Chu Shui said, It's my turn sooner or later anyway. Might as well enter this door now, so we can look out for each other. Bai Xiao Xiao sighed, her voice softening but carrying a faint, barely noticeable reproach. I feel a bit of pressure having you follow me. If something happens, I'll always feel like I led you to harm. Tell you what, if you're really set on going with me, come to my place tonight. I have something I want to discuss with you. All right. That night, at the Mi Xiang estate, Ning Chu Shui arrived at the estate gates. Bai Xiao Xiao, wearing a pink dinosaur pajama set, was already waiting at the entrance, a few minutes early. After welcoming him in, the two didn't head straight to her villa. Instead, they strolled through the quiet, deep garden. It had to be said, the atmosphere here at night was something else. The garden was meticulously maintained, and everywhere you went, you could catch the scent of fragrant flowers. Ning Chu Shui watched Bai Xiao Xiao walking ahead in her dinosaur pajamas, her tail swaying back and forth. He felt an irresistible urge to step forward and grab that tail. Of course, Ning Chu Shui had always been a very straightforward person. So, when he wanted to grab that tail, he really did grab it. Bai Xiao Xiao naturally noticed. She turned back in surprise to look at Ning Chu Shui, unable to resist teasing him. So even a grown man like you can be childish sometimes. A bit of OCD. When something sways in front of me, I instinctively want to grab it. Bai Xiao Xiao shot him a glance but didn't struggle. She let him hold the tail of her pajamas, and they continued their walk through the estate. For a while, it was unclear whether she was leading Ning Chu Shui or he was leading her. At the same time, she began to introduce Ning Chu Shui to her sixth crimson door. Chu Shui, the theme of my sixth crimson door is hunting the murderer. Bai Xiao Xiao looked down at the path beneath her feet, speaking slowly. Inside this crimson door, we'll be transferred to an apartment building. Before the killer murders all of us, we have to find him and call the police. Bai Xiao Xiao took a photo of the mission on the crimson door. Ning Chu Shui looked at the image on her phone, a contemplative gleam in his eyes. Mission: find the murderer in UTN apartment before being killed and call the police. Note 1. The police will arrive at the apartment in 3 minutes. Note 2. The murderer will find opportunities to kill up to 2 people per day. Note 3. If the murderer discovers that you know their identity, they will ignore the rule in Note 2 and kill you. Ning Chu Shui studied the photo with grave intensity. I understand. I'll meet you at Ghost Dwelling tomorrow. As he spoke, he made to leave, but Bai Xiao Xiao called him back. Hey, my villa's huge. You can't stay? Ning Chu Shui lifted his gaze and glanced at Bai Xiao Xiao. It's not that I can't. It's just a bit inconvenient. Bai Xiao Xiao's house was indeed enormous, and he wasn't one to be overly particular. After all, he'd already slept over the night before. But Ning Chu Shui worried he might bring unnecessary danger to her doorstep. He was, after all, the current holder of the letter, and his previous actions may have left traces. If an assassin from Luo Shengmen truly came, Bai Xiao Xiao could be innocently caught in the crossfire. Seeing the genuine concern on Ning Chu Shui's face, Bai Xiao Xiao didn't press him to stay. She saw him off from Mi Xiang. The next day, the two arrived at Ghost Dwelling. Only Tianxun and Junlu Yuan were there. The other 3 were absent. Sister Bai, Brother Chu Shui, be careful. We'll be waiting for your return tonight. Tianxun and Junlu Yuan both watched them with anxious eyes. Lately, every door they entered carried such high risk. If not a 7th-level door, then a 6th. It was impossible not to worry. After a brief exchange, Bai Xiao Xiao and Ning Chu Shui ascended to the 3rd floor. Watching the crimson door being pushed open by a pale, bloodless hand, Bai Xiaoxiao suddenly grasped Ning Shui's hand gently and pulled him through the doorway together. When he awoke again, Ning Shui found himself outside a dilapidated residential area. It looked like a building from the 1980s, a single, crumbling structure surrounded by cracked ground. Broken water pipes had left patches of mold and green moss everywhere, giving off a foul stench. An old gatekeeper on the first floor was watering plants with a basin. His hair was stark white, his face deeply lined. He looked to be in his 60s or 70s. One leg was lame, making him hobble as he walked. While watering, he casually glanced at the crowd on the first floor. But when he noticed someone staring back, his expression shifted instantly. He turned and shuffled back inside. Quite a few people stood here. A quick count put it at 12, including himself. A soft hand suddenly landed on Ning Shui's shoulder. He turned to see Bai Xiaoxiao's beautiful face. "This mission won't be easy," she murmured, her eyes scanning their surroundings. 12 people. Even if only 2 die each day, we can only hold out until the 6th day. Ning Shui nodded. This crimson door hadn't given them a clear time limit. In theory, they could stay forever. But everyone knew that was impossible. Time was pressing. They had to find the killer quickly. The group quickly found their teammates who had entered the crimson door together. Those who had come alone chose to pair up with other solo entrants, forming temporary alliances. Ning Shui and Bai Xiaoxiao arrived at the base of the building, tilting their heads to gaze up at the decrepit apartment complex before them. The structure was built with a faintly ornate style, 7 stories tall, complete with a rooftop terrace. In addition to the interior staircase, there was an exterior stairwell, but it only reached the 6th floor. The 7th floor had none. Suddenly, the hallway door on the 2nd floor swung open, and a middle-aged woman around 50, wearing high heels, stepped out. The keys in her hand jingled, jangling, as if waking a sleeping golden dog curled up at the entrance of the first-floor janitor's room. The dog bared its teeth, growling, then barked loudly. "Woof! Woof! Woof!" The middle-aged woman shot at a vicious glare and snapped. "Ungrateful mutt, I feed you meat every day, and you don't even know how to flatter me. If I weren't so good-natured, I'd have stewed you by now." The golden dog seemed cowed by her harsh tone, whimpering twice before lying back down. The woman stepped before the crowd. Her makeup was cheap and garish, and her voice carried a brash edge. "Are you the tenants moving into the Yutian apartments this time?" From the crowd, someone immediately answered, "Yes, all of us." The middle-aged woman swept her gaze over them and gave a slight nod. "All right, follow me." With that, she led everyone up to the 7th floor. "I'm Feng, the landlord of the Yutian apartment complex. There are 12 of you total. I have 7 units here. Each one is a bit old, but the space is generous. 3 people per room is no problem. Hot water runs 24 hours a day, non-stop. Nothing else to say. If something in the room breaks, you find your own repairman and pay for it yourselves. Here are the keys." Feng handed keys to each group, then deliberately added, "Let me make this simple. There are rules in this apartment. First, do not go up to the rooftop. Second, do not enter room 404. Third, do not leave your room between midnight and 4 in the morning." As her words fell, someone in the crowd immediately asked, "Landlord, can we ask why?" Feng glanced at the questioner, her voice turning a degree colder. "Do you know why the Yutian apartments are so cheap?" The man shook his head. Feng let out a thin smile. "Because in this complex, something very bad once happened. The scandal back then was too big. It ruined the building's reputation. To keep anyone from gossiping about this place again, I have to set some rules for tenants who don't know what they're walking into, so they don't run into anything." The woman's expression shifted as she spoke, and she cut herself off abruptly. "In short, I still hope you'll follow the rules here. It'll be better for you. I live in room 210. If you have an emergency and need help, you can come find me." With that, the landlord turned and headed back downstairs, leaving the stunned crowd standing in silence. The keys in everyone's hands were ancient, covered in the marks of time. The paint had flaked off in many places, and on the handle of each key was a piece of tape, dusty and grimy, with the room number written on it. Ning Shui and Bai Xiao were in room 707. After unlocking the door, the decay inside was visible to the naked eye. Aside from a bed, there was only a table and a TV mounted on the wall. The two immediately began checking every corner of the room for surveillance equipment. During the search, Ning Shui found something strange in a drawer. It was a clump of a woman's hair. Ning Shui narrowed his eyes. He did not take it out immediately. This clump of hair, hundreds of strands, was twisted into a neat bundle. It was far too tidy. Someone had deliberately placed it there. Even if the drawer had once held a comb or hairpins, any leftover hair would have been scattered and loose, not arranged so deliberately. And there was a faint scent of shampoo in the drawer coming from that clump of hair. So Ning Shui concluded that a woman must have lived in this room not long ago. He just couldn't understand why she would leave a lock of hair behind. Shui, come look at this. Suddenly, Bai Xiao's voice came from the next room. Ning Shui stepped out of the small room and entered the kitchen. Bai Xiao had opened all the cabinets in the kitchen. There were 5 cabinets in total, all beneath the stove, and every single one of them had clear bloodstains. Although they were dry and discolored, Ning Shui recognized them immediately. He slowly crouched down, intending to inspect the cabinets, but he didn't notice the pale hands reaching out from behind him. Those hands were about to touch the back of Ning Shui's neck. Shui! What are you doing? A terrified female voice rang out from the kitchen doorway. Hearing that voice, Ning Shui's entire body broke out in goosebumps. He spun around quickly, a pair of red scissors already appearing in his hand. But the Bai Xiao who had been standing beside him was gone. Another Bai Xiao stood at the doorway, staring at him in shock. Ning Shui and Bai Xiao locked eyes. He spoke slowly. Which crimson door is this for me? Bai Xiao understood his meaning and replied, This is my crimson door, the 6th door. Hearing her answer, Ning Shui let out a sigh of relief. He hurriedly left the kitchen. As he turned back at the doorway, he saw that the cabinets he had opened moments ago were now closed. Or rather, those cabinets had never been opened at all. Ning Shui's face paled slightly. A warning bell rang in his heart. Because he had already passed the 7th crimson door, he had unconsciously let his guard down against the earlier, easier ones. If Bai Xiao hadn't appeared so suddenly, he didn't know what would have happened to him. Was it the 7th crimson door that made me relax? The subconscious impact is terrifying. The 7th crimson door had a safe period beforehand, which made me unconsciously assume the time before all crimson doors start is safe. But what did I just experience? An illusion? Where was the transition within the illusion? Could it be that ball of hair? Bai Xiao noticed Ning Shui's expression was off and immediately asked what had just happened. Ning Shui did not hide the truth and explained everything clearly. After hearing this, Bai Xiao immediately went with Ning Shui to the room next to the kitchen to check the drawer. They even tried holding their breath to prevent the strange scent from affecting their minds. But this time, when they pulled open the drawer, the ball of hair inside had vanished. Ning Shui's eyes flickered. He chose not to stay in that room for long and instead left with Bai Xiao, closing the door behind them. This apartment is very strange. We were attacked as soon as we entered. I just don't know what triggered it, or if the others had similar experiences. Bai Xiao opened the door. It was dusk now, still some time before nightfall. The sky wasn't completely dark yet, and though the light was dim, they could still see the hallway clearly. When the door swung open, Bai Xiao saw a pale-faced person standing in the hallway outside. This person, they had seen him earlier downstairs. He was also a ghost guest participating in this crimson door. He stood in front of room 703, his whole body trembling, his lips slightly pale. Hey, what's wrong with you? Bai Xiao asked him cautiously. Hearing Bai Xiao's voice, the man slowly turned his head. And then Bai Xiao and Ning Shui could see clearly. Half of his face was covered in blood. It was as if he had encountered something utterly unbelievable. He opened his mouth for a long time but couldn't get the words out. At that moment, more people stepped out of their rooms. They, too, saw that something was very wrong. With more people around, everyone felt a bit bolder. They walked straight toward this man and surrounded him. What happened? Brother, don't panic, don't panic. Here, have a cigarette first. A man with a simple, honest appearance stepped forward and handed him a lit cigarette. The man took it, trembling, took 2 puffs, and finally spoke. Li Qian is dead. Hearing this, everyone was shaken. Li Qian? Who was that? They had only just entered the door. How could someone already be dead? Was Li Qian your roommate? The man smoking nodded slightly and introduced himself to everyone. His name was Tai Ko. He had entered the 6th Crimson Door alone. Li Qian had done the same. The 2 of them formed a team and shared a room. Earlier, while searching the room, he suddenly heard a strange sound from the next room and ran over. As I walked past, I saw Li Qian holding a sharp kitchen knife, stabbing herself again and again. Blood gushed across the floor, but she seemed to feel no pain. Then she scraped off her own features, and even her scalp. As he spoke, the flesh on Taiko's face trembled. In the end, she drove the knife into her own head, turned back to look at me, and smiled, a smile that made my skin crawl. After she finished smiling, she flicked the blood from the blade straight at me. I was splattered with blood. Terrified out of my mind, I ran straight out. Listening to his description, a chill crept up everyone's spine. They entered room 703 together. Sure enough, the moment they stepped inside, the thick, coppery stench of blood hit them. They walked into the kitchen and saw a female corpse lying there in utter chaos. That corpse was undoubtedly Li Qian. Her left hand gripped a blood-stained fruit knife tightly. Her right hand clutched something else. At that moment, the honest, simple-looking man stepped closer. He pried open Li Qian's right hand and found a red string clenched inside. This must be a ghost artifact. The man's expression turned grim. It seemed she sensed something was wrong and thought to rely on the ghost artifact for protection. But for some reason, it didn't work. The faces of everyone present turned unusually pale. A ghost artifact, yet it was useless. Didn't this mean they all had 0 room for error? Can we be absolutely sure this is a ghost artifact? Maybe Li Qian met with an accident because she picked up that thing. From the crowd, someone questioned the honest man's judgment. A few of you, go find the landlord. The rest of you, stay here and keep watch. The body won't disappear anytime soon. Who's going to find the landlord? The speaker glanced around the room. No one volunteered. It seemed everyone who had entered was relatively sharp. They had barely stepped through this door, and the murderer behind them had already launched an attack. This meant that every second from now on, they were in danger. Going to find the landlord would undoubtedly increase their risk. Before things were clarified, who would want to shoulder that extra burden? But as silence fell, a male voice suddenly rang out. "I'll go find the landlord." The crowd turned toward the sound. It was Ning Chu Shui. He pointed at the corpse in the room and said, "You all watch it. I'll be back in 10 minutes. Seeing someone dare to take the first shot, the others were naturally happy to reap the benefits. After speaking, Ning Chu Shui and Bai Xiaoxiao headed downstairs. The landlord, Wang Feng, lived in room 210. Going down the stairs didn't take long. Bai Xiaoxiao followed behind Ning Chu Shui, a hint of curiosity in her voice. "Chu Shui, going downstairs at a time like this, it's probably not very safe." Ning Chu Shui replied, "No place is safe." He paused, a flicker crossing his face. "I'm inclined to agree with that man's guess just now. Li Qian must have seen or discovered something before she died. That's why she took out the ghost artifact and held it tightly in her hand. But the ghost artifact didn't work. It couldn't save her." Hearing this, Bai Xiaoxiao felt a chill creep up her spine. Why would the ghost artifact be useless? Ning Chu Shui was silent for a moment, then spoke in a low voice. "There are only 2 possibilities. 1. Li Qian truly committed suicide. 2. Li Qian didn't kill herself, but the person who killed her wasn't a ghost either." Bai Xiaoxiao thought back to everything that had happened before. She, too, sensed something was wrong. It was Tai Ko, Li Qian's roommate. There was so much blood on his face, it didn't match his story that Li Qian had swung a bloody knife at him. How much blood could a knife hold? Could it be that Tai Ko killed Li Qian? The moment this thought surfaced, even Bai Xiaoxiao was startled into a gasp. No, it's not Tai Ko. If he had killed Li Qian, she would have definitely turned into a vengeful ghost. Moreover, since he was the one who struck the blow, Li Qian's transformation into a malicious spirit would have been very fast. But we were there for a while, and we never saw Li Qian return for revenge, so Li Qian couldn't have been killed by Tai Ko. But if he didn't kill her, why is there so much blood on his face? Bai Xiaoxiao felt her mind starting to spin. She shared her thoughts with Ning Qishui. Ning Qishui then said, "If Tai Ko isn't a ghost guest, then all of this could be explained. But I think the chance of Tai Ko not being a ghost guest is very small, because this is the sixth door. There are bound to be many cautious and clever people. A native trying to blend in would be very easily exposed." He stopped speaking there. Without realizing it, the two of them had arrived at the door of room 210. Ning Qishui knocked gently. Knock, knock, knock. From inside the door, no one answered. Ning Qishui raised an eyebrow and raised his hand to knock again. Knock, knock, knock. Still, no one answered. The two people outside the door looked at each other, seeing the strangeness reflected in each other's eyes. What was going on? Was the homeowner not home? After hesitating for a long time, Ning Qishui reached out his hand to knock again. But then the door to the next room, room 209, opened. An old woman with white hair stepped out. She looked at Ning Qishui and the others standing at the door of 210, stunned for a moment. A flicker of curiosity passed through her cloudy eyes. "You are?" Ning Qishui replied, "Hello, we are tenants of the Yutian apartment. May I ask if the homeowner of room 210 is out?" Hearing this, the old woman was stunned for a long time, her expression vacant. 210? What are you talking about? Room 210 hasn't had anyone living there for years. The moment she finished speaking, the expressions of both listeners changed drastically. Room 210 has been empty for a long time? The old woman nodded. That's right. I'm the only one living on this floor. The apartment is very old. No new people have moved in. After she said this, she closed her door, picked up her trash bag, and prepared to leave. Seeing this, Bai Xiaoxiao called out to her. "Grandma, may I ask, do you know where Wang Feng lives?" The moment she heard the name Wang Feng, the old woman's body jerked to a halt. Wang Feng? That name sounds so familiar. She muttered to herself. I feel like I've heard it somewhere before. After thinking for a long time, she shook her head. I can't remember. Anyway, there's no one named Wang Feng in this building right now. With that, she turned and walked away. Watching the old woman's retreating back, Ning Qishui and Bai Xiaoxiao felt a bone-piercing chill creeping up from the soles of their feet. No one named Wang Feng? Then who gave them the key? A ghost? Or had that woman been lying to them from the very start? Was her name not Wang Feng at all? Did she not live in room 210? Countless doubts swirled in their minds. Bai Xiaoxiao's voice wavered with hesitation. Qishui, should we go in? Ning Qishui snapped back to reality. He knew Bai Xiaoxiao was talking about room 210. He glanced at his watch, then tried pushing the door. Creak. The yellow-painted wooden door looked locked, but in reality it had rotted through. The moment he pushed, the lock fell straight to the ground. A thick cloud of dust and the smell of aged wood rushed into their faces. Inside the room, the curtains were drawn tight. Who knew how many years they hadn't been opened? Everywhere was thick dust and cobwebs. It seemed the old woman hadn't lied. This room really was uninhabited. Stepping slowly inside, Ning Qishui picked up the lock from the floor. It had been completely corroded by moisture. Then, in the next moment, a voice rang out from ahead, making his skin crawl. What are you looking for me for? Ning Qishui recognized that voice. It was Wang Feng's voice. He lifted his eyes. The familiar silhouette of Wang Feng came into view. The room before him had changed drastically. It was no longer the dilapidated, decaying space from before. Everything was tidy, clean, and orderly. There was only one difference. Bai Xiaoxiao was no longer beside him. The door behind him was wide open. Ning Qishui's pupils flickered with confusion. What was happening? Had he unknowingly fallen into an illusion again? If so, then the killer behind this crimson door was terrifyingly powerful. He knew that the head-raising ghost inside the seventh crimson door could also use illusions. That ability was so twisted that the crimson door had placed hard restrictions on it. But if all of this was an illusion, then it made no sense. Falling into an illusion twice without realizing it meant that the killer behind the sixth crimson door was even more fearsome than the head-raising ghost. That question, of course, had an obvious answer. The sixth crimson door was the sixth door. Its difficulty could not surpass the seventh. So Ning Chu Shui immediately concluded he was not trapped in an illusion. Not before, and certainly not now. He lifted his eyes, glancing at Wang Fang before him with a displeased expression, probing. "Do you know me?" Wang Fang stared at him coldly, thinking to herself, "Is this guy sick or something? Are you ill? If you're sick, go see a doctor. Don't come here causing trouble. Even if you are my tenant, there's nothing in the contract saying I'm responsible for your mental state." Ning Chu Shui's eyes lit up. "Someone died on the 7th floor. Aren't you concerned?" Hearing this, Wang Fang was taken aback. Someone died? Half believing, she followed Ning Chu Shui out of the room and headed toward the 7th floor. As they passed room 209, he heard furious cursing and the sobbing of a woman and child from next door. Even as they walked away, he could still make out a man's shouts and the shattering of a glass bottle. Ning Chu Shui turned his head and asked, "What's going on in 209? Wang Fang snorted coldly. "Old Shu's family, same old story. He loves drinking. Whenever he has nothing to do, he goes out to drink and gamble. If he loses, he comes home and beats his wife and kids. Whenever he throws a tantrum, his wife and child cry. I live right next door. It's such a nuisance." Wang Fang grumbled loudly as she led Ning Shui up the stairs, her mouth running non-stop. "There's a guy on the 3rd floor who loves making crafts. As soon as it gets dark, it's bang, 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 either sawing something or hammering something, disturbing the whole floor above and below. I've told him several times, but he's as stubborn as a mule, completely ignores me." She chattered on, telling Ning Chu Shui about the daily lives of these households. But Ning Chu Shui wasn't particularly interested. When they reached the 4th floor, he noticed it was much quieter than the floors below. The entire floor felt unusually gloomy, and the door leading to the spiral staircase at the end of the hallway was locked. Stranger still, there were almost no trash bags outside the doors along the hallway. Compared to the lower floors, it was clean to the point of being abnormal. Ning Chu Shui immediately recalled what Wang Fang had told them earlier, that they shouldn't go to room 404. Seeing Wang Fang still rambling, Ning Chu Shui cut in directly. "Landlord, why is the 4th floor so quiet? And that door over there, it's locked too?" Hearing this question, Wang Fang, who had been talking nonstop, suddenly fell silent. About a minute and a half later, when the two reached the 6th floor, Wang Fang finally spoke. "There's a couple living on the 4th floor. In room 404? Yes." As for that couple, Wang Fang seemed unwilling to say more, and her tone turned cold. Ning Chu Shui pressed further. "Only that family lives on the 4th floor?" Wang Fang did not answer his question. She only said, "What does that have to do with you?" "I'm warning you. Don't wander around the 4th floor unless you have business there. If something happens, I won't be responsible." Wang Fang seemed to hold some fear toward the family on the 4th floor. Seeing she was unwilling to speak, Ning Chu Shui knew better than to ask more. On the 7th floor. When they returned this time, all the ghost guests who had participated in the Crimson Door had vanished. The hallway and rooms were no longer in the same state of ruin as before. Who died where? Wang Fang's voice was cold, brimming with the anger of being toyed with. Because all the doors on this floor were shut tight, if Ning Chu Shui had discovered a corpse, at least one door should have been open. Ning Chu Shui also sensed something was wrong. It felt as though he had traveled to another dimension. But why could Wang Fang in this time and space still remember him? Was there something special about the landlady, Wang Fang? Though he couldn't figure it out, he still walked to the door of room 703 and knocked.
Knock, 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 knock.
A man's voice, tinged with panic, immediately came from inside. Who is it? Ning Chu Shui and Wang Fang exchanged glances. She wasn't stupid. The moment she heard that voice, she sensed something was wrong in the room. So Wang Fang cleared her throat and stepped up to the door. It's me, the landlady. Open up quickly. I need to talk to you. The man's voice inside grew even more flustered. It's not convenient right now. Wait a bit. Wang Fang scowled and kicked the door hard. Not convenient, my ass. Hurry up. Perhaps intimidated by Wang Fang's roughness, or because she had always left a fierce, domineering impression on these tenants, the man inside hesitated for a moment before saying, all right, I'll open the door for you. But I'm warning you, Sister Wang, when you come in, don't scream and don't be scared. I swear, no matter what you see, I'll explain it clearly to you. Hearing this, Wang Fang was even more certain something had happened in the room. She agreed. Soon, footsteps sounded inside, and the man walked to the door, gently pulling it open. A gaunt, weak face with dark skin peeked out from the doorway. Seeing that face, Wang Fang instinctively muttered, damn it, because nearly half of that face was stained red with blood, and the other half, his skin was deathly pale. Old Jiang, what happened to you? Wang Fang's eye twitched. The man called Old Jiang was silent for a moment, then decisively opened the door fully. You two, see for yourselves. He sighed, the smell of tobacco thick on his breath. The two looked into the room. Blood was splattered across the floor. A young woman lay on the ground, her hand gripping a sharp knife. And on the wrist of the hand holding the knife, Ningqiu Shui clearly saw a red string tied around it. Since they were traveling together, Ningqiu Shui and Wang Fang were not afraid that the other party meant them harm. However, what surprised Ningqiu Shui was that the lodger in this room seemed completely unfazed by his presence. Even though he had never met him before, no matter what he said or did, the man treated him like thin air. After the two entered the house, the man immediately closed the door, then lit a cigarette. Still trembling with fear, he circled around the corpse on the floor and sat down on the sofa. He stared at the coffee table in front of him, still stained with blood, his eyes bloodshot. Talk, Jiang Asi, what happened? It was clear that the homeowner trusted this man named Jiang Asi deeply. Even after discovering a fresh female corpse in his room, she didn't call the police right away. Jiang Asi exhaled a plume of white smoke and gave a bitter laugh. I killed someone. Wang Fang stared at the female corpse on the floor in silence for a long time. I remember you two had a good relationship. Why did you kill her? Jiang Asi felt a bitter taste in his throat. He pressed his temple hard with one hand, as if his head was throbbing with pain. She stabbed herself with the knife. Wang Fang said earnestly, but you just clearly said, I killed someone. Jiang Asi looked at the female corpse lying in a pool of blood on the floor and muttered to himself, that's right, I did say that, because what just happened is too unbelievable. No one will believe me. We had just made love on the bed, but after it was over, Ashi told me she wanted to go to the kitchen to cook for me. I saw it was getting late, so I agreed. Then I turned on the radio and listened to the news for a while. Who would have thought? Ashi suddenly walked out of the kitchen holding a sharp knife. Without a word, she just kept staring at me and smiling so much it gave me goosebumps. Then I asked her what was wrong. Ashi plunged the knife into herself once, twice, 3 times. Jiang Asi described this process with a very natural expression. He didn't look like he was lying at all. She doesn't have a mental illness. She doesn't. She was a good girl. Why did she suddenly become like this? The police won't believe me, Sister Wang. They won't believe me, because that knife has my fingerprints on it. As he spoke, Jiang Asi suddenly broke into a strange smile. His expression gradually twisted into something sinister. He abruptly braced his hands on the coffee table and leaned in close to Wang Fang, his mouth repeating endlessly, no one will believe me. No one will believe me. No one will believe me. No one. Wang Fang had a highly developed sense of caution. She slipped her hand into her pocket and gripped something unknown tightly, though her face still showed comfort toward Jiang Asi. As for Ningqiu Shui, he walked over to the female corpse and carefully examined the body. He was exceptionally skilled at investigating crime scenes. After a simple elimination process, Ningqiu Shui confirmed that this woman had not committed suicide. She had been stabbed to death by Jiang Asi, one wound at a time. And the posture in which the woman was killed was also very strange. There was no blood on Jiang Asi's body, only blood on his hands and one side of his face. He pictured the posture in his mind. Jiang Asi must have embraced the woman from behind, then stabbed her from the front. The blood-stained side of his face was the one pressed against hers. When he peeled off her scalp, the blood splattered onto his cheek. But why would he use such a bizarre method to kill? Ning Chu Shui slowly undressed the woman's disheveled clothes, directly examining her entire body. Soon, he discovered another clue. This woman named Ah Shi had clearly had sexual relations with Jiang Ah Si before she died. Her lower body was slightly swollen and red, an unmistakable sign. Jiang Ah Si's words weren't entirely a lie. After dressing the woman, Ning Chu Shui stood up, swept his gaze across the room, and his eyes stopped on an old radio on the wooden table. He walked over to the radio and pressed the play button. Black Widow, at. A strange, indistinct sound crackled from the radio, like a nature documentary introducing some kind of spider. But Ning Chu Shui listened several times, over and over. He could only make out these 4 words clearly, then just 3. Black Widow, Black Widow, Black. As the radio kept repeating, Ning Chu Shui's vision and consciousness began to blur. He shook his head violently, no improvement. He directly gripped his thigh tightly, and with a sudden force, a sharp pain shot through him. With the intense pain, the haziness vanished. The familiar smell of dust once again filled his nostrils. Ning Chu Shui was shocked to realize he seemed to have returned to normal time and space. In his hand, he still gripped the rusty iron lock. After touching certain special items, I traveled back in time. What a bizarre setup, and it seems it wasn't just my consciousness crossing over, but my entire body going back to the past. Is there anything the Crimson Door can't do? Ning Chu Shui's eyes flickered, then returned to normal. The door behind him was tightly shut. The entire room was plunged into an extremely gloomy state. Ba Xiao Xiao had vanished. Perhaps she had returned upstairs. Or rather, like him, after touching some special items, she had suddenly crossed back to an earlier time and space. Ning Chu Shui thought for a moment, then decided to go back and check. But as he walked to the door and was about to open it, he suddenly sensed something. His entire body tensed up. No, the lock to this door was in his hand. Logically, the door couldn't be shut this tightly. With that thought, Ning Chu Shui pulled out the sharp red scissors. He didn't open the door immediately. Instead, he slowly crouched down. But when he pressed his face close to the ground, he saw a bloodshot eye through the crack in the door. The person outside the door, at this very moment, was using the same method, watching him. Ning Chu Shui felt no fear at all. He suddenly threw open the door, ready to confront the other party head-on. If the other party was a ghost, then the ghost artifact on him would be effective. If the other party was not a ghost, then he had even less to worry about. However, the other party seemed to have anticipated his next move. They immediately turned and ran toward the staircase. Ning Chu Shui gave chase, following them up to the 4th floor. There he saw a figure with a strangely awkward running gait open the door to room 404, slip inside, and slam the door shut. The 4th floor hallway was very dim. Combined with the sense of age and decay, it was truly terrifying. Especially the door to room 404, it constantly exuded an inexplicable aura of malevolence. Ning Chu Shui remembered Wang Feng's warning. He did not pursue. From what he had just experienced, Wang Feng was indeed a bit strange and was hiding some secrets. But she was not someone who wanted to harm them. He cast a deep glance down the 4th floor corridor, then turned and went upstairs without looking back. By now, more than half an hour had passed since he had first gone downstairs. When he returned to the 7th floor, the crowd that had gathered earlier had not yet dispersed. They were still discussing something. It was unclear whether they were talking about the deceased or about Ning Chu Shui, who had just vanished. "Chu Shui, are you all right?" Seeing Ning Chu Shui's figure appear at the stairwell, a worried voice called out from the crowd. Then Ning Chu Shui saw Bai Xiao Xiao run over, carefully scrutinizing him. "Chu Shui, which crimson door did you go through?" Although Bai Xiao Xiao's eyes were filled with concern, she remained vigilant. Ning Chu Shui made the sign for 4. She finally breathed a sigh of relief. "It's good that you're safe." He walked up to the group, and the others gathered around. "Brother, what happened to you just now? Why did you suddenly disappear?" Ning Shui shook his head, his expression full of confusion. "I don't know. I'm very curious too. At that moment, when I stepped into the room, I suddenly felt dizzy. When I came to, you were all gone, so I hurried back here. However, I didn't see the landlord in room 210. The old lady living in 209 said that no one has lived in 210 for years. When everyone heard this, their expressions turned especially grim. In fact, they had already heard Bai Xiao talk about the landlord earlier. But because Ning Shui hadn't returned, these people couldn't help but doubt Bai Xiao. They didn't know that Ning Chu Shui and Bai Xiao had a very close relationship, so they subconsciously linked Ning Chu Shui's disappearance to her. Ning Chu Shui had returned safely, and he also said that room 210 was unoccupied. This sent a chill down everyone's spine. If room 210 was unoccupied, then the landlord who gave them the keys earlier couldn't have been a living person, could they? Thinking of this, the keys in their pockets suddenly felt a few degrees colder. Some of the ghost guests remembered very clearly. When Wang Fang came down from the second floor, the watchdog in the residential complex's yard kept barking at her. Gulp! Someone couldn't help but swallow their saliva. What? What do we do now? What else can we do? Just take it one step at a time. There's another problem. How do we handle food? Let's just go out to eat. After all, this mission doesn't confine us to the Yuqian apartments. We can clearly go anywhere nearby. After a round of discussion, everyone decided to leave the 7th floor first and head outside to see if there was anything to eat. Of course, a small number of people, after seeing Li Qian's corpse, had lost their appetite and chose to return to their rooms. Outside the Yutian apartments, there were quite a few grocery stores. Ning Chu Shui and Bai Xiao picked a shop that looked rather old. Business here seemed to be doing poorly. After sitting down, they ordered 2 bowls of noodles. During that time, Ning Chu Shui told Bai Xiao about what he had experienced. She fell into thought after hearing it all. The steaming hot beef noodles were brought out quickly. Bai Xiao took out 2 pairs of chopsticks, handed one to Ning Chu Shui, and then said, "So that means, earlier you must have reversed the flow of time, returning to the starting point of the timeline when the murderer committed the crime." The murderer killed Ashi first, so Li Qian in the corresponding room also died, and the manner of death was exactly the same as Ashi's. Bai Xiao pondered, furrowing her brow, then dismissed her own thought. No, that's not right. It has nothing to do with the timeline. After all, the danger you encountered must have come before Li Qian's. So that means it must be the red string in Li Qian's hand. That wasn't her ghost artifact at all, but a crucial prop, one that could be real or fake, that she found in the room. What she didn't expect was that this very prop would kill her. Ning Chu Shui picked up a piece of beef with his chopsticks and put it in his mouth. That's probably it. Earlier, I also saw the hair in the drawer right before the accident happened. Maybe there's something relatively dangerous in each of our rooms, but this kind of danger is probably a one-time thing. By the way, who took the red string from Li Qian's hand? Bai Xiao pursed her lips and winked at Ning Chu Shui, pulling out the red string with her other hand and placing it on the table. No one dared to take it, so I had to do it. Seeing the red string, Ning Chu Shui smiled and said, "You're a girl. How can you be so brave?" Bai Xiao snorted. "I've trained myself." "Do you think everyone is a monster like you?" Ning Chu Shui picked up the red string and placed it on himself. "I'll keep it for now." Bai Xiao nodded. Since there was nothing to do in the shop, the board owner sat down at the table next to them and fiddled with his phone. Ning Chu Shui looked at the owner curiously, his heart stirring slightly, and asked him, "Boss, how many years have you been running this restaurant here?" The owner chuckled and pointed at himself. "Boy, look at me. How old do you think I am? I'm 62 this year." "I've been running a restaurant here for 41 years. Ning Chu Shui's eyes lit up at this. "Then, do you know what happened at the Yutian apartment complex back in the day?" Hearing this, the boss's warm expression suddenly froze. "I'm not a tenant in that building, so I don't really know what happened inside." But Ning Chu Shui had no intention of letting him off the hook. She pressed on, "Not just everyday trivialities. I mean big things, like deaths, hauntings, that sort of thing." The smile on the boss's face vanished completely. He seemed to sink into some unpleasant memory. You shouldn't ask about this. Some things happened back then, but I don't know the details. About 20 years ago, I think, there was a massacre in that building. It shook the whole city for a time. More than 20 years ago, a massacre that shook the entire city occurred at Yuchian Apartments. It was because of that massacre that the complex became a notorious haunted house, far and wide. Fewer and fewer people came to live there. I don't know who called the police back then, but I heard that when the cops arrived, Yuchian Apartments was moving a body out. At the time, the main gate was packed with people. I just stood on the steps and caught a few glimpses. So many people threw up just from watching. It left a deep impression on me. Half of that corpse's body had been sliced to pieces, and the person seemed still alive. One hand was clutching a knife. It wasn't a big knife, just an ordinary fruit knife. Even now, the boss shuddered at the memory of that event. The flesh on his body looked like it had been carved off with a blade. In many places, the bone was exposed. It's hard to imagine what that person went through inside that apartment. You kids, you'd better stay far away from that building. It's evil in there, and it's not safe. After hearing this, the two asked the boss a few more questions, but he just waved his hand, saying that was all he knew. Too much time had passed, and the boss himself didn't want to remember anymore, so Ning Chishui had to give up. Pressing further would yield no useful information. After dinner, they returned to Yutian Apartments. Night fell quickly. By the time they got back, the streets had grown distinctly gloomy. The old woman from room 209 was struggling to carry a large bag of rice home. She was old, her legs were weak, and burdened with such a heavy load, she hobbled along unsteadily. Ning Chishui stepped forward and lifted the rice bag for her. The old woman saw Ning Chishui, paused in surprise, then a gentle smile spread across her face. "Oh, it's you, young man. Thank you. This old woman's legs aren't what they used to be. Carrying something this heavy is a bit much." Ning Chishui smiled. "Grandma, there's something I'd like to ask you." The old woman nodded slightly, her voice a little hoarse. "Go on, please." "How many years have you lived in Yutian Apartments?" "Over 20 years now." "Then do you know that more than 20 years ago, a massacre occurred in this complex?" Hearing this question, the old woman's expression shifted only slightly. "Are you talking about the Yutian murder case?" "That wasn't a massacre. It was a mental breakdown that happened to the households in the building." This incident caused a huge uproar at the time, scaring all of us. We really thought there was a terrifying killer hiding in the complex. Later, after the forensic examination, it turned out that these people basically died from suicide or fighting each other. For example, there was a family living on the 7th floor. This old lady really can't remember the exact details, but it seems he used a knife handle to cut off half the flesh from his own body. Tell me, how could a person of sound mind do something like that? But we still trusted the police's assessment. After all, they are the experts. After listening, Ning Chishui frowned slightly. Bai Xiaoxiao beside her asked, "All those people?" "Ah, no, all the victims had mental issues?" The old woman nodded vigorously. "Yes!" This old lady still remembers this very clearly. Everything happened within the same time frame, probably from midnight to 4 or 5 in the morning. At that time, a lot of crazy laughter came from the upper floors of the building. It was terrifying. I was worried something had happened here, so I called the police. Later, when that police officer came to question me, I also asked him who the killer was, and he told me something that put my mind at ease. Bai Xiaoxiao immediately asked, "What did the police tell you?" The old woman spoke slowly. I don't remember the exact words, but the gist was that to attack so many victims in just a few minutes and erase all traces, there had to be at least 5 people. And besides the victims, there seemed to be only 4 survivors left in the building, and none of those 4 had the motive or the ability to commit the crime. As for why the others in the building suddenly went mad, I'm not really sure either. Recalling the story from back then, the old woman's eyes were filled with confusion. But this has been over for many years now. No need to dig it up anymore, sigh. She let out a long breath. The two of them escorted her to the 2nd floor. watching as the old woman took out her keys to unlock the door. Ning Chushui asked one more question. By the way, ma'am, do you remember who lived in room 404 of Yutian Apartments back then? Mentioning room 404, the old woman froze in place, thinking for a long time before slowly speaking. This old lady's memory isn't very good, young man. If you want to ask about what happened back then, I can still recall a bit. But if you're asking about the people, I'm really a little fuzzy. I think there was a doctor and a patient living in room 404. Hearing this, Ning Chushui's eyes immediately narrowed. But before that, I heard people say there was a couple living there. The old woman nodded slightly, then shook her head. That's right. At first, I thought they were a couple too. Only, later on, I couldn't tell you where I saw it, or maybe the police asked me by chance. She paused, her voice trailing off. They said one of them was the head of a psychiatric hospital, and the other was that doctor's patient. The old woman's face was deeply confused. Clearly, she couldn't recall the details of what had happened that year. After she entered the door, Ning Chushui and Bai Xiaoxiao returned to the 7th floor. Passing the 4th floor, they deliberately stopped in front of room 404 to take a look. In the dim, gloomy corridor, the two stood before the door. The wooden door was nearly rotted through, and the metal plate marked 404 had been so corroded by rust that the numbers were unreadable. A deep sense of unease settled in their hearts. It was as if some terrible secret lurked behind that door. The moment they opened it, they would be trapped inside, unable to control themselves, and encounter something truly horrifying. Let's go back. Ning Chushui thought for a moment, then decided not to touch that door. Earlier, the strange man at door 210, to escape pursuit, had run straight to 404, as if he believed that room was completely safe. So far, this apartment was filled with things they couldn't understand. The ghost artifacts on them might be useless behind this crimson door. Ning Chushui still felt it was better to be cautious. After returning to the room, Ning Chushui checked and confirmed there were no signs of a search, then relaxed slightly. Something might happen tonight. Bai Xiaoxiao sighed. The mission was written clearly. The murderer behind this crimson door could kill up to 2 people per day. So far, only 1 person had died, which meant the murderer still had 1 more slot. He would never let everyone survive the night. After a simple wash, Bai Xiaoxiao got into bed first, lying on the inside. Even though the 2 of them were now sharing a room as a man and a woman, under the immense pressure to survive, the awkwardness between genders faded considerably. Not to mention, they were already acquaintances who had passed through many crimson doors together. Even some ghost guests they met for the first time wouldn't make a fuss. Ning Chushui also climbed onto the bed, lying down beside Bai Xiaoxiao. When the lights went out, the room was instantly swallowed by darkness. Thump, thump. Don't misunderstand. This wasn't someone knocking at the door. It was the sound of a heartbeat. Ning Chushui turned his head in slight surprise. You're that nervous? In the darkness, Bai Xiaoxiao glared at him. Hey, this is the first time I've slept with a man. A little nervous is normal, isn't it? Ning Chushui touched his nose. Of course, he could feel the slightly stifling atmosphere between them. But still, it was okay. They were already very familiar with each other. We haven't done anything, just slept, that's all. Humph. The two fell silent for a moment. Bai Xiaoxiao suddenly turned over, propping herself up to look at the man beside her. Chushui, what do you think? What's the deal with that killer, really? At first, she had assumed the killer in this building was a wronged ghost, or some kind of malevolent spirit. But based on the information they'd gathered during the day, things weren't that simple. Even though the red rope Li Qian was clutching when she died today wasn't her own ghost artifact, I still firmly believe that the killer behind this crimson door doesn't belong to the realm of ghosts. By the way, is it only ghosts who possess supernatural abilities in the world behind the crimson door? Bai Xiaoxiao shook her head slightly. No. Monsters can, too. Monsters? Like the witch doctor in Chiyu village, she belonged to the monster category. The abilities of monsters aren't as twisted as those of ghosts, but what makes them terrifying is that many monsters evolved from humans. They retain all of human intelligence. In a way, Monsters threaten us even more than ghosts do. Based on my guess, the killer behind this crimson door is most likely a monster. We just don't know what its ability is yet. After Bai Xiaoxiao finished speaking, both of them fell silent again. This was truly a headache-inducing problem, because so far the only victim, Li Qian, hadn't been directly killed by the killer. Earlier, I rewound time and returned to this building, to the moment just over 20 years ago, right after the massacre happened. There was also a death in room 703. The woman who died was named Ah Si. Her death was identical to Li Qian's, and her boyfriend, Jiang Ah Si, was just like Tai Ko. If we compare them that way, Li Qian was most likely killed by Tai Ko. Bai Xiaoxiao's brow twitched slightly in the darkness. If that's the case, how did Tai Ko escape the vengeance of Li Qian's vengeful spirit? After another long silence, Ning Shui suddenly spoke a reply that made Bai Xiaoxiao freeze. What if Li Qian didn't know she was killed by Tai Ko? Or what if she went willingly? In the darkness, Bai Xiaoxiao's body trembled involuntarily. Willingly killed. Could it be an illusion? Ning Shui thought carefully. That possibility can't be ruled out. When he first entered the room, he had also encountered something strange. After seeing the hair in the drawer, a non-existent version of Bai Xiaoxiao had led him into the kitchen. At that moment, Ning Shui had truly let his guard down. Luckily, the real Bai Xiaoxiao appeared in time, preventing things from spiraling further. But I feel the ability the enemy is using isn't illusion. Ning Shui's gaze grew dim. Wait a moment. Let's take turns keeping watch tonight. You sleep first. Normally, guests at the ghost dwelling weren't easily attacked by ghostly entities while sleeping, unless there was a clear rule in effect. But this time, their attacker might not be a ghost at all. Both of them had to be careful. Bai Xiaoxiao gave a slight nod, then closed her eyes. Before long, her breathing became steady and even. She hadn't expected to fall asleep so quickly. With someone watching over her, she felt a deep sense of safety. Then, in the dead of night, Bai Xiaoxiao suddenly woke up. It wasn't Ning Shui who roused her. It was a strange sound coming from outside the door. It sounded like a woman muttering to herself. Why are there so many? Why are there so many? Let me scrape you all clean. Bai Xiaoxiao opened her eyes and immediately saw Ning Shui, who raised a finger in the darkness, a silent signal for her to stay quiet. Bai Xiaoxiao gave an okay sign, then slowly sat up. Earlier, the landlord had warned them not to go outside from midnight until 4 in the morning. It was still over an hour until 4. The two of them listened intently. The woman outside paced back and forth along the hallway, accompanied by a rustling sound, as if she were scraping something. Suddenly, Bai Xiaoxiao remembered the victim the old woman and the noodle shop owner had mentioned the night before. Half a body, drenched in blood and flesh. In that instant, a shiver ran down her spine. She wanted to shake off this inexplicable chill. Ning Shui looked at her, reached out, and took her hand. Wait 1 more hour. Bai Xiaoxiao felt the warmth from Ning Shui's palm and did not resist. Okay. The atmosphere was not romantic, as one might imagine. At this moment, both of their attention was fixed on the eerie woman outside the door. Until 4 in the morning. Almost on the dot, the woman outside suddenly let out a shrill, almost manic laugh.
Ha! That's right! Symmetry!
After she spoke, her voice abruptly stopped. In its place came the sound of a heavy object hitting the floor. The two waited a little longer. Only after confirming there was no more movement outside did they open the door. A thick, nauseating stench of blood rushed toward them. Although the hallway was very dark, both of them immediately saw the corpse of a woman lying in a pool of blood on the floor. At the same time, several other doors slowly creaked open. The other 5 people, apparently having heard the commotion in the hallway, waited until 4 o'clock before cautiously stepping out. The honest, simple-looking man from before stared at the corpse on the ground and asked Ning Shui and Bai Xiaoxiao, "Little brother, what's going on here?" Seeing the others' gazes turn toward them, Ning Shui shook his head. "We also came out after 4. When we stepped out, she was already like this." As he spoke, everyone slowly approached the woman's corpse. Her condition was horrifying beyond words. The right half of her body was a mess of blood and mangled flesh. The skin and muscle had been peeled away in strips, and even the bones had been scraped clean in many places. Scattered within the pool of blood on the floor were chunks of her own flesh. What sent a chill down everyone's spine was the woman's left hand, which was clutching a sharp fruit knife tightly. Obviously, not long ago, she used this very knife to slice off pieces of her own flesh, one by one. Another person had died. The manner of death was gruesome. It was almost identical to the descriptions given by the old woman from room 209 and the noodle shop owner earlier. The woman now lay in a pool of blood, lifeless. She had used a knife to cut away half the flesh from her own body. No one knew what had happened to her to make her do such a thing. Does anyone know her? Ning Chu Shui turned to look at everyone, but all remained silent. There are still 3 people who haven't come out. Let's call them out and ask, suggested a petite, short girl. Her name was Wen Fei, and she lived with the honest man, Han Chong, in room 705. Everyone agreed with her suggestion. So the remaining 3 were called out. When they saw the corpse in the hallway, they were all shocked, instantly jolted awake. Huang Yan, a slender girl in a white dress, said, trembling, "Her name is Huang Yan." Everyone looked at her. The girl quickly introduced herself. "I shared a room with her. My name is Yu Qi. We came from the same ghost dwelling." Ning Chu Shui's eyes lit up. "Did she have any ghost artifacts on her?" Yu Qi nodded. 3. Everyone shuddered. She had 3 ghost artifacts on her, yet she died so decisively, without leaving behind any useful information? That meant ghost artifacts were useless behind this crimson door? Impossible. A man named Tai Ko from room 703 shouted in panic from the crowd. He was extremely agitated, his demeanor clearly abnormal. How could ghost artifacts be useless? Even at the 7th door, the 8th door, ghost artifacts couldn't possibly be useless. Ning Chu Shui observed Tai Ko, noticing his forehead was covered in cold sweat. Tai Ko was very confused, very scared. This wasn't right. People who could enter the 6th crimson door couldn't be this weak. Unless he was someone brought in by others. But he had entered alone. So it was certain that this was indeed Tai Ko's 6th crimson door. A person who could reach and dare to enter the 6th crimson door alone might not be smart enough, but they would surely be calm and brave. They couldn't be like Tai Ko now, so easily shaken mentally. His mental state is problematic. Ning Chu Shui narrowed her eyes, finally grasping the crux of the issue. A person's mental state couldn't just become problematic for no reason. Tai Ko, Li Qian, and even Huang Yan lying on the ground, they must have encountered something that made their minds abnormal. Don't panic. The fact that ghost artifacts are useless also means the murderer hasn't truly appeared yet, the plump girl Wenfei comforted him. The reason Huang Yan did this might be because the murderer set a trap. After her comfort, Tai Ko didn't feel better. Instead, he became even more tense. The killer behind the scenes has yet to reveal itself, and they have already lost 2 people. And because it wasn't a direct confrontation, their ghost artifacts were rendered completely useless. This bizarre situation left everyone feeling a bit lost. The ghost artifact was their most reliable life-saving tool after the Crimson Door, and the enemy seemed to know this, using cunning methods to avoid direct conflict with the ghost artifacts on their bodies. It's terrifying. We're all going to die by its hand. No one can escape, not a single one. Tai Ko muttered like a madman, then turned and walked into room 703, slamming the door shut, completely severing contact with the outside world. You've all seen the current situation. Han Chong's voice was choked with emotion. So far, 2 people have died, but we haven't even caught a glimpse of the killer. If this continues, I'm afraid things won't end well. I hope if anyone has any clues, they won't keep them to themselves. Let's analyze them together. Our chances of finding the killer will be higher. Han Chong looked around, his gaze finally settling on Ning Chu Shui. Little brother, you disappeared for a while in room 210 earlier. Did you really not find anything? Ning Chu Shui could confirm that he had found nothing, but after a moment's thought, he spoke. There is one thing I'm not entirely sure about. It might be bad luck to mention it. Everyone's eyes lit up. What is it? Ning Chu Shui explained. Over 20 years ago, a massacre that shook the entire city occurred at Jade Field Apartments. The people on the 7th floor, the ones who lived in these very rooms before us, all died. A woman named Ashi died exactly like Li Qian, and another victim died exactly like Huang Yan, who is now lying on the ground. When Ningqiu Shui said this, a chill ran down everyone's spine. You mean the killer is murdering us in the same way they killed those people over 20 years ago? Ningqiu Shui nodded slightly. That's right. Furthermore, the killer we are facing now might be even more terrifying than the one from 20 years ago. As soon as he finished speaking, a girl named Yu Qi in the crowd raised her hand, gritting her teeth as she said, "Actually, we also encountered something strange in the room earlier." She told everyone that Huang Yan had gone into the kitchen to check, and afterward seemed a bit uncomfortable. At the time, she had asked Huang Yan if she had found anything, but Huang Yan never answered her. Huang Yan has been acting very strange ever since she inspected the kitchen. At first, I didn't think much of it, because she's usually quiet in the ghost dwelling anyway. But then, she kept standing in front of the bathroom mirror, muttering to herself, saying things like, "Why was the flesh on the right side of her body so much thicker than the left?" It bothered her. She said she wanted to take a knife and cut it off. Back then, she only said it. She didn't actually do anything unusual. But then, in the middle of the night, she suddenly woke up. I asked her where she was going. She said, "The bathroom." I was too sleepy to think much of it. I never imagined that. As she spoke, Yu Qi trembled slightly. Human fear stems from two things, death and the unknown. Right now, both were present. She didn't know why Huang Yan had suddenly become like this. Compared to the way she died, Yu Qi would rather she had been killed by a ghost. Huang Yan's mind was compromised, too. Thought back to the strange things he had experienced in his own room earlier. A suspicion formed in his mind. He immediately asked Yu Qi, "That fruit knife in Huang Yan's hand, was it originally in the kitchen?" Yu Qi paused to think. She wasn't entirely sure. "I think so. At the time, I went to clean the other rooms. The first room Huang Yan cleaned was the kitchen. I trusted her, so I didn't go in to check. Huang Yan had encountered a mental disturbance in the kitchen. In the end, she used a fruit knife to cut away half of her own body. Where did that fruit knife come from? From another room? Or was it already in the kitchen?" Yu Qi hadn't seen it either. If he had to guess, Ningqiu Shui believed the knife was far more likely to have appeared in the kitchen than in any other room. In other words, Huang Yan had most likely discovered that fruit knife while inspecting the kitchen. Then she touched it, and that touch corrupted her mind. Ningqiu Shui then thought of the tangled woman's hair he had found earlier while inspecting room 707. Perhaps that clump of human hair, like the fruit knife in Huang Yan's hand, possessed some kind of special power. Once they touched it, their sanity would begin to fracture. Fortunately, he had been careful enough back then. He hadn't actually touched it. He had only caught a faint whiff of its scent. If he hadn't, Bai Xiaoxiao might not have been able to pull him out of that bizarre hallucination with just a single shout. Then, Taiko and Li Qian in room 703 must have encountered something similar. Before Li Qian died, she was clutching a red string tightly in her hand. That must be connected to the woman named Ashi, who died over 20 years ago. And Taiko, what about him? Thinking this, immediately walked to the door of room 703 and knocked. Taiko's mind was already unstable. Was it because of Li Qian's influence? Or had he also touched something he shouldn't have inside that room? In any case, Ningqiu Shui had to extract useful information from before his mind completely collapsed. But what happened next defied all their expectations. Ningqiu Shui knocked on the door several times, yet no one answered from inside the room. Just as they were debating whether to break the door down, a distinct noise rang out from within. Crack! That sound was like glass shattering. Everyone felt a foreboding chill. Something's wrong! The plump girl, Wenfei, suddenly screamed, sprinting toward the room next door. That was the room she and the honest man Han Chong were staying in, right beside room 703. It was room 702. The group followed her inside, rushed to the window and looked out. The chaotic, bloody scene below made them shudder. Taiko was dead. He had jumped, committing suicide. Looking down from above, Taiko's posture was grotesquely twisted. His entire skeleton must have been shattered, especially his head, like a watermelon smashed to pieces everywhere. It wasn't hard to tell. He had fallen headfirst, his will to die terrifyingly strong. Seeing Taiko's corpse, Ning Chushui couldn't help but recall the words Jiang Asi had said to the landlady, Wang Feng, earlier. No one believes me. No one believes me. No one believes me. Not a single one. Those words carried a deep, bone-piercing despair. He had witnessed his girlfriend's suicide with his own eyes, but all the real-world evidence pointed to him as the murderer. Though Ning Chushui didn't know what happened afterward, he could guess that Jiang Asi had eventually jumped to his death in utter despair. He couldn't accept the police's fair judgment, because in his heart, his girlfriend had killed herself. It had nothing to do with him. He would rather die. Ning Chushui was silent for a moment, then said to the others, Anyone want to go down and take a look with me? They exchanged glances. In the end, besides Bai Xiaoxiao, 2 people decided to go down with Ning Chushui. They were Han Chong and Wen Fei. They ran down the stairs, reached a secluded corner of the apartment complex's courtyard, and found Taiko's body. He had fallen so hard he was no longer human-shaped. His posture was also strange, both hands pressed beneath his chest, as if clutching something. Ning Chushui turned him over and saw Taiko gripping a radio tightly in his hands. The radio was shattered, but a few remaining fragments were enough for Ning Chushui to recognize it as the very radio that had been placed in Jiang Asi's room. Red string, knife, radio, hair. Ning Chushui muttered, suddenly understanding. He had figured out what method the murderer was using to hunt and kill them. Little brother, did you find something? Han Chong, seeing Ning Chushui deep in thought, quickly asked. Ning Chushui pondered for a moment, then spoke to them. To put it simply, the 3 who died weren't directly killed by the murderer. That's why the ghost artifacts on them never activated. Han Chong nodded. That's right. We initially had the same speculation. After all, both ghosts and monsters are suppressed by ghost artifacts, and the opponent couldn't be human either, since no human could do something like this. The only explanation is that the killer never showed up at all. But there's one thing I don't understand. How did the killer make us commit suicide without ever revealing itself? Ning Chushui picked up a broken piece of the radio from the ground. It was still stained with Taiko's blood. Through this. Seeing the object in Ning Chushui's hand, Han Chong and Wen Fei both fell into deep thought. Did you check the rooms? Both nodded slightly. Not exactly, we just gave them a quick glance. Usually, mission rules dictate that the places we're assigned to stay rarely have direct danger. So, before Wen Fei could finish, Ning Chushui cut in. You were lucky, like finding a needle in a haystack. Because everyone who checked the rooms thoroughly is dead. Both of them shuddered at that. They hadn't shared Ning Chushui's experience. They hadn't returned to the Yutian apartment complex over 20 years ago. So they didn't know that the red string, the fruit knife, and the shattered tape recorder before them weren't ghost artifacts. They were murder weapons. Don't touch anything in the room if you don't want to die. Of course, things that have already been triggered don't count. It seems murder weapons can only be used once. Every room probably has one. Wen Fei's eyes lit up at this. So that means, as long as we don't touch these murder weapons, the killer can't do anything to us. Han Chong gave a bitter smile. Xiao Fei, nothing in this world is that simple. If we don't touch the murder weapons, the killer will definitely find another way to deal with us. Hearing this, Wen Fei smiled awkwardly, her chubby cheeks flushing red. Sorry, I just got too excited. Ning Chushui stood up. Let's head back. Right now, it seems the killer's main method of attack is mental influence. This indirectly confirms that its direct combat ability isn't that strong. That's actually good news for us. After saying this, Ning Chushui and Bai Xiaoxiao left the apartment complex to go eat. Actually, this could be considered a good thing for us. With that, Ning Chushui and Bai Xiaoxiao walked out of the residential area to grab a meal. On the road, Bai Xiaoxiao's voice carried a hint of gravity. Chushui, I suddenly thought of something. Ning Chushui, who had been looking down in thought, glanced at Bai Xiaoxiao and asked, What is it? Bai Xiaoxiao lifted her eyes and slowly spoke a truth that made even Ning Chu Shui shiver. The red string, the knife, the radio, they've always been there. So doesn't that mean the clump of hair you found in the room before should also exist? But when we went back to check later, that clump of hair had vanished. Chu Shui, have you ever wondered, where did that clump of hair go? If Bai Xiaoxiao hadn't brought up this detail, Ning Chu Shui truly wouldn't have thought of it. The past day or two had flooded him with too much information, leaving his mind a tangled mess. That clump of hair, it should be the same type of murder weapon as the red string, the fruit knife, and the radio. But why did only the hair mysteriously disappear? Could it be because the hair was useless? Ning Chu Shui furrowed his brow, another doubt settling in his heart. The two of them casually found a small eatery, ordered a serving of soy milk and fried dough sticks, and began their breakfast. The shops here opened very early, usually from 5 in the morning until 9 at night. As they ate, Ning Chu Shui suddenly caught sight of a spider web in a corner of the room. On that web, a black widow spider was lying in wait. This wasn't the first time Ning Chu Shui had seen this kind of spider, but seeing it here in this eatery made him recall the 4 words that had crackled from the radio. The Black Widow is at. Where was the Black Widow? Ning Chu seriously reorganized his thoughts. An ordinary person wouldn't kill and then commit suicide for no reason. The murderer had planted a certain idea in their minds, driving them to do these things. Taiko committed suicide because he felt utter despair. Taiko killing Li Qian, she, was probably related to the content that kept playing from that radio. That radio, it kept repeating, the Black Widow is at. I couldn't hear the rest clearly, but back then, Jiang Asi must have heard it. This repetitive content drove his mind to the breaking point. He killed his girlfriend, all the while insisting that she had killed him. Ning Chu Shui's eyes flickered. He asked the shop owner, "Boss, is this kind of spider common around here?" The owner glanced at the Black Widow spider. Ning Chu Shui pointed to in the corner and chuckled. Black Widow? Oh, they're very common. Then, do you know its characteristics? Characteristics? What characteristics can a spider have? A black rear end. I mean, its habits. Hearing this question, the owner paused for a moment, then replied, Habits. Now that you mention it, I do know one thing. The Black Widow, it eats the male spider after mating. Hearing that, both of them froze mid-bite. Ning Chu Shui murmured, So that's it. The sentence on the radio must have been, After the Black Widow mates, the female spider will eat the male spider. Jiang Asi was hypnotized, or rather, he was bewitched. He saw himself as the male spider and his girlfriend as the female. Before the incident occurred, he and his girlfriend had just been intimate. Afterward, his girlfriend went into the kitchen to cook for him. She was definitely holding a knife. Jiang Asi thought his girlfriend wanted to kill and eat him, so he fought back and killed his girlfriend instead. It's certain that Jiang Asi wasn't the only one whose mind was corrupted. His girlfriend was too. Hearing this, Bai Xiaoxiao got goosebumps. Chu Shui, are you saying Jiang Asi's girlfriend really wanted to kill and eat him? Ning Chu Shui hesitated for a moment, then nodded gently. That's right. After Ashi died, the red string on her hand inherited her resentment. That object was a contaminated weapon. When Li Qian touched it, her mind was eroded. Similarly, Taiko must have touched that radio. At this point, they were no longer as confused as before. The killer's method of murder was gradually coming to light. Only by figuring out his method could they effectively protect themselves. Mental erosion doesn't kill instantly, so the ghost artifacts on them had no effect until death. This killer cleverly bypassed the protective mechanism of our ghost artifacts. After gradually resolving these doubts, the two didn't look relieved at all. Because another question still lingered in their minds. Where had the tuft of hair from the previous room gone? Carrying this doubt, they immediately returned to room 707 after eating. 2 people had died today, which meant that for the survivors, this was an excellent opportunity to investigate. As long as they didn't clearly reveal that they had discovered the killer's identity or weren't caught red-handed after uncovering the killer's true identity, the killer wouldn't strike at them. The two quickly searched the room. It was almost a sweep. Of course, if they encountered any strange objects, they wouldn't touch them. Instead, they used a tool they had bought from outside. However, after searching everywhere, they still couldn't find that tuft of hair. It was as if it had vanished into thin air. Something's wrong. This isn't right. These are all real objects. They can't just disappear into nothing. Someone must have taken it. Ning Chu Shui paused, thinking carefully. There was basically no one in their room. No one could have suddenly appeared, and no one could have been hiding. Who had the ability to take that tuft of hair right under their noses? And why would they want to take it? Chu Shui, I think we made a mistake in our thinking earlier. Bai Xiaoxiao sat on the bed, elbows resting on her knees, palms cradling her delicate little face, her expression full of contemplation. What mistake? Ning Chu Shui's eyes flickered. Bai Xiaoxiao spoke softly. Do you remember what you told Han Chong today? You told them there might be a murder weapon hidden in each of our private rooms. At first glance, this idea seems fine, but in reality, it is not. Thanks to Bai Xiaoxiao's reminder, Ning Chu Shui suddenly realized the mistake he had made. Under normal circumstances, the killer can only kill 2 people a day. So, he cannot place a murder weapon in every room. Bai Xiaoxiao nodded, her eyes glinting. Exactly. Earlier, the killer must have been targeting us. But perhaps he didn't expect you to be so cautious. You didn't touch that bundle of hair. This rendered the murder weapon almost ineffective against your mind. I only had to call out once, and you woke up. So the killer immediately shifted targets, aiming for room 703. Since room 703 had 2 people, the killer assumed both might die on the same day. To avoid an unexpected situation where he might end up killing 3 people in one day, he used some method to retrieve the murder weapon from our room. After all, the rules of the Crimson Door impose strict limits on him. He cannot break the rules. Bai Xiaoxiao corrected Ning Chu Shui's flawed thinking. It was true. The fact that 4 consecutive people in the room had all encountered murder weapons had subconsciously made Ning Chu Shui assume that every room hid one. But this idea was wrong, because the killer could only kill 2 people per day. The behavior of these ghost guests was uncontrollable. If every private room contained a murder weapon, there could easily be a situation where 4 or 5 people died in a single day. Xiao Xiao, you're right. The killer definitely wouldn't leave a murder weapon in every room. But how did he retrieve the murder weapon right under our noses? There was no answer. After that, Ning Chu Shui and Bai Xiaoxiao went knocking on doors again, one by one, on the other floors of the corridor. Except for the 4th floor, they had visited every other floor. But this building was essentially empty. Only room 209 had an old woman living in it. Then there was the security guard at the ground floor gate. The security guard was very strange. He didn't want to talk to them much. The yellow dog he kept was also perpetually snarling. There was truly no way to get any useful information from him, so the 2 had to return to their room. But this time, when they got back to the room, they saw someone who surprised them. It was none other than Feng. Sister Wang, why are you here? Seeing Feng inexplicably appear in the room, a chill ran down both their spines. Based on previous information, Feng was very likely not a living person. Lifting her face, which carried a trace of sorrow, Feng's brows were knitted with worry. But after seeing Ning Chu Shui, she clearly became much more at ease. So you 2 are finally back. I have a small favor to ask. Ning Shui calmly pulled out a pair of red scissors, then sat down across from Feng. Sister Wang, go ahead. Feng's complexion was poor. Jiang Asi is dead. Both of them were startled. Jiang Asi is dead? How did he die? Feng seemed a bit flustered. I don't know. He suddenly committed suicide. He smashed the window and jumped from the upper floor. Ning Chu Shui lifted his eyes, probing cautiously. When he died, was he still clutching that radio from the house to his chest? Feng was stunned. You knew? Ning Chu Shui didn't directly answer Feng's question, but instead asked back, Then Sister Wang, what exactly did you come to ask me? Feng hesitated for a moment, her 2 fingers fidgeting together. Today, the police found the bodies of Jiang Asi and Ashi, and they came to question me. They asked me if I knew the cause of death for Jiang Asi and Ashi. Ning Shui said, What did you tell them? Wang Fang was silent for a while, then looked at Ning Chu Shui with a gaze that carried both scrutiny and a plea for help. I don't know, so I wanted to ask you. After all, you were there at the time, weren't you? Wang Fang's appearance was very strange. Her behavior was also bizarre. Seeing the pleading look in Wang Fang's eyes, Ning Chu Shui seemed to grasp something and nodded gently. Sister Wang, just tell the police that Zhang Asi was afraid his girlfriend would be like the Black Widow spider, killing and eating him after mating, so he killed his girlfriend, Ah Shi. Then, unable to accept this truth, he chose to commit suicide. Hearing Ning Chu Shui's absurd explanation, Wang Fang showed no surprise at all. She nodded lightly, then stiffly stood up, opened the door, and walked out. Ning Chu Shui and Bai Xiaoxiao exchanged a glance, understanding each other, and immediately stood up to leave the room, following behind Wang Fang. 6th floor. 5th floor. When Wang Fang reached the 4th floor, she suddenly stopped. Wang Fang didn't continue forward, but instead turned around somewhat stiffly, heading toward the dim hallway of the 4th floor. Seeing this, the two of them felt no surprise at all. Finally, Wang Fang walked to the door of room 404, then opened it. Inside was pitch black, with nothing visible. However, Wang Fang didn't step directly through the door. Instead, she tilted her pale face, quietly sizing up the two people in the distance. Stay away from room 404. It sounded like a threat, yet also like a warning. Then Wang Fang stepped into room 404, closing the door behind her. After she entered room 404, the two walked up to the door. Should we go in? Bai Xiaoxiao asked. Ning Chu Shui shook his head. Not now. We know absolutely nothing. If we barge through that door right now, how is that any different from Gei Kai? A gambler always loses in the end, and behind the crimson door, losing once means there's no way to turn things around. Ever. After he finished speaking, Ning Chu Shui abruptly changed the subject. Come with me to room 210 to take a look. Something unexpected happened there earlier, and I didn't search the room thoroughly. Now that we're going back, we should be able to find some useful clues. Wang Fang plays a very special role in this crimson door. If she wants to tell us something, or needs our help, she's bound to leave behind some useful leads. Hearing this, Bai Xiaoxiao's eyes lit up. They immediately made their way to room 210 once more, only to find the door locked. An old, rusty padlock hung on it. How is this possible? Bai Xiaoxiao gasped, covering her mouth. When they had come here before, the lock was clearly broken by Ning Chu Shui, and he had even taken that rusty lock with him. Why was there now a brand new, weathered padlock in its place? Staring at the lock before him, Ning Chu Shui seemed to understand something. He slowly pulled a key from his pocket. It was the key to room 707. The key Wang Fang had given him. He inserted it into the lock, turning it gently. The door swung open. Gazing at the ancient room, still thick with dust and cobwebs just as before, a flicker of realization crossed Ning Chu Shui's eyes, like a stone dropped into a still lake. How intriguing! Wang Fang! Wang Fang! Just what role are you playing in all this? Inside the room as they searched, Bai Xiaoxiao stood guard at the door for Ning Chu Shui, wary of any strangers approaching. Like the time before, when someone had stumbled past with those bloodshot eyes. Before long, Ning Chu Shui found a photograph in the room. It showed a woman wearing a mask and an oversized patient gown, standing beside a man in a white lab coat, both wearing bright smiles. The photo was taken at the entrance of the apartment complex. At first glance, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but Ning Chu Shui's sharp eyes quickly spotted the problem. That's not right. Why is the patient gown on that woman so loose? He frowned. Normally, patient gowns are designed for comfort and easy identification by doctors and nurses. A little looseness is expected, but this was far too much. Even the shoulders were a full size too wide. This gown clearly didn't fit the woman. Instead, it looked like it would suit the man beside her perfectly, and the white coat the man wore would fit the woman much better. Could they have swapped clothes? Staring at the two people in the photo, Ning Chu Shui suddenly recalled what the old woman in room 209 had told him earlier, that the people in room 404 weren't a married couple, but a doctor and his patient. Still, something didn't add up. An old woman, one whom even Wang Fang, the homeowner, couldn't remember, Why would she recall that room 404 held a doctor and a patient? What's more, when she said this, there was a hint of doubt in her voice, as if even she didn't know why she remembered it. The old woman assumed that during the police interrogation, they had casually mentioned it to her. But Ning Chu Shui felt things weren't that simple. Given the old woman's memory, if it were just a casual remark from a police officer over 20 years ago, she couldn't possibly have held on to it for so long. The matter of room 404 having a doctor and a patient must have left a deep impression on her in some way. Only then could it make her, a woman with such poor memory, still recall it perfectly decades later. The people in this apartment, they seem mentally unstable. Ning Shui's eyes were like still water. Whether it was Zhang Asi, his girlfriend Ashi, or the female victim who always believed the right side of her body was too fat and used a knife to cut her own flesh, all of them had psychological issues. And this was the killer's hunting method. His prey wasn't murdered, they died from illness. Compared to traditional killing methods, this kind of attack was clearly more insidious and harder to trace. The police couldn't catch the killer, because the killer never directly killed them, nor left any evidence of the crime. The killer knew how to silently infiltrate his prey's mind, making them develop mental illnesses that would lead to their own deaths, and in the end he would let them take their own lives or slaughter each other. He turned back to the old photograph before him. The man is the doctor, the woman is the patient. But their clothes are swapped. Does that mean, in reality, the woman is the doctor and the man is the patient? Why is he wearing the doctor's uniform? Ning Chu Shui stared at the woman in the photo, scrutinizing her closely. He always felt that her eyes looked familiar. Where had he seen them before? Since Ning Chu Shui hadn't met many people in this instance, it only took him a moment to realize. The woman's eyes were very similar to the old woman in room 209. Chu Shui, what did you find? Bai Xiao saw Ning Chu Shui staring down at the photo. Even though she knew the killer wouldn't strike today, she still felt a bit anxious, so she spoke up to ask. Ning Chu Shui held up the photo in his hand and told Bai Xiao what he had discovered. After she looked it over, she offered her own speculation. The killer is adept at exploiting the subconscious and controlling the minds of others, so he must be a master in the field of psychology. Someone like that is either a psychiatrist or a long-term psychiatric patient undergoing treatment. I know a very skilled psychologist in the capital. He once told me to be especially careful when dealing with certain psychiatric patients, because some of them suffer from cognitive disorders. They are insane, yes, but they are not stupid. In fact, they are often smarter than the average person. There was a special case at the 4th hospital in the capital. While interacting with her attending doctor, she actually learned the hypnotic techniques the doctor used on her, and then used hypnosis to control that very doctor and escape from the mental institution. The situation in the photo seems somewhat similar. Hypnosis. In a way, this is also a form of mind control. It's just not as terrifying as the method the killer has displayed. But the killer is not human, it is a monster. Amplifying certain human abilities is also to be expected. After all, this is the world behind the Crimson Door. Anything is possible. If the speculation is correct, then this woman must have been the man's psychologist, but during their interactions, she was brainwashed and mentally controlled by him. In the end, their identities were swapped. That's why the clothes they're wearing look so mismatched. Bai Xiao is no ordinary person. Her thinking is highly flexible. She has encountered many people and events outside, and her perspective is broad. But I have one question. The woman in the photo must be the old lady from room 209. In other words, she did not die in the apartment massacre over 20 years ago. But the killer murdered everyone in this building. Why did he let this old lady survive? What is so special about her? Bai Xiao still hasn't found the answer. As things have developed to this point, both of them share a suspicion that the killer is very likely the patient posing as the doctor in room 404. But they still lack sufficient evidence, so they cannot draw a definitive conclusion. If their judgment is wrong, they will be in serious trouble. Bai Xiao's experience tells her that the police, the only means to end this mission, will not allow them to act recklessly. If the police arrive and they have identified the wrong killer, they will very likely pay a heavy price. If Ning Chu is not mistaken, then the old lady in room 209 must be the female doctor from apartment 404 over 20 years ago. She was hypnotized and brainwashed by her male patient and subsequently controlled. And that male patient is very likely the true killer behind the massacre at UTN apartments. However, this line of thought and speculation has a fatal flaw. That is, the old lady in room 209 is still alive. She survived the massacre over 20 years ago. She was the one closest to the killer, yet the killer spared her. Too strange. Completely illogical. Right now, the two people in room 404 are our prime suspects. We should focus our attention on them, Ning Chu said. The man and woman in room 404 were both potential killers. The man seemed to be a mental patient posing as a doctor, and the woman was the sole survivor of that massacre years ago. Both had distinctly peculiar personalities. He searched the room again. This time, Ning Chu confirmed there was nothing left, then he left. As he exited, he deliberately glanced at the old lock on the door. Let's go back to our room first. I have a very unusual theory, but I need to verify something. Hearing Ning Chu speak so mysteriously, Bai Xiaoxiao grew curious. She immediately followed him back to room 707. Once inside, Ning Chu immediately retrieved the old lock he had picked up from room 210 earlier. A suspicion had formed in his mind when he saw that old lock newly appeared on the door of room 210. But at the time, Ning Chu hadn't focused on it. Now, they had the photograph from room 210, the crucial information Wang Feng had left for them. After returning, Ning Chu prepared to verify his earlier hypothesis. He tried using the key to room 707 on the broken lock from when they first entered room 210. He tried several times, it wouldn't fit. Just as I thought, a smile curled at the corner of his mouth. What did you find, Chu Shui? Bai Xiaoxiao moved closer. Even now, she still didn't understand what Ning Chu was trying to do. Ning Chu explained to Bai Xiaoxiao, earlier, in room 210, I clearly broke a lock. But just now, when we left, another old lock appeared on the door. Do you know where that old lock came from? Seeing the slight confusion in Bai Xiaoxiao's eyes, Ning Chu continued, Wang Feng locked room 210. Bai Xiaoxiao was startled. Wang Feng, why would she lock that room? And with such an old, worn-out lock? Ning Chu stared at the lock in his hand, almost completely corroded by rust, and said slowly, It's not an old lock. Wang Feng installed a new lock. She must have wanted to prevent others from entering that room. Hearing this, Bai Xiaoxiao immediately understood what Ning Chu meant. Her bright eyes flickered with astonishment. Wang Feng replaced the lock on that room over 20 years ago, at the Jade Field Apartments? Ning Chu nodded. Exactly. Behind this door, there must be two timelines. One is the past of the UTN apartment, over 20 years ago, the very moment the murder occurred. The other is the future, our present time. Wang Feng must have guessed we'd return to room 2 she left behind, so she deliberately swapped the lock on room 210, a future lock we could open with the key to 707. Through these two locks, Wang Feng is sending us a crucial message, that within these two timelines, the past can influence the future. Because Wang Feng replaced the lock on this door in the past, a different old lock appeared on it in the future, over 20 years later. And that lock of hair that vanished mysteriously from our room, the killer must have gone back to some point in the past and taken it early. That's why the hair could disappear right before our eyes. Because once the past changes, the future changes with it. Ning Chu gave Bai Xiaoxiao plenty of room to think. Can the killer move freely between the two timelines? The thought sent a chill down Bai Xiaoxiao's spine. We can't rule out that possibility. Wang Feng vanished after entering room 404, and before that, the red-eyed man who blocked him at the door of room 210 also disappeared into room 404. It seems that room might very well be the tunnel connecting the two timelines. Ning Chu was already piecing together all the details, bit by bit reconstructing the story behind this crimson door. Bai Xiaoxiao carefully considered everything Ning Shui had said. From an outsider's perspective, it was easier to spot the flaws. But Shui, according to what you're saying, the past can influence the future. That sounds reasonable. But the future can't influence the past, right? Time is an irreversible process. I've been through similar dungeons involving time shifts behind the Crimson Door before, and none of them could break this rule. When you went back to the past before and observed Jiang Asi's incident, Jiang Asi treated you like air. That's the natural reaction. But Wang Feng wasn't like that. Wang Feng, who was originally in the past, could clearly perceive and remember you from the future, and even actively came to the future to ask for your help. Doesn't that mean the future has influenced the past? Hearing Bai Xiaoxiao's words, Ning Shui fell silent. The future shouldn't influence the past. But behind this crimson door, the future had influenced the past. This proved there were still gaps in their speculation. After a long pause, Ning Shui suddenly said, "What if these two timelines don't actually exist?" Bai Xiaoxiao was startled. Just then, a frantic knocking came from their door.
Knock, 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 knock.
A sudden knock at the door made both of them tense up. Even though the danger was likely over for today, Ning Shui still reached for the red scissors with a wary hand, gripping them tightly. When she opened the door, she saw Wenfei's panicked face. "Save Han Chong, now," she stammered, her voice trembling. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button and subscribe to support me.